June 30th, 2019, Austin Howell, a fearless and widely respected free solo climber, set out for another daring climb at Shortoff Mountain in North Carolina's Linville Gorge. Known for his ascents without ropes or harnesses, Austin approached the day with the same intensity and purpose that defined his life. But by late morning, that mountain bore witness to a tragic fall that would claim the life of a climber who never played it safe. Austin wasn't someone who blended in. Born in Friendswood, Texas, he discovered climbing at 19 while attending the University of Houston. Almost immediately, it became more than a hobby. It was his obsession, his therapy, his calling. In 2008, he survived a 35-foot fall at an indoor climbing gym that fractured multiple bones and vertebrae and left him with a traumatic brain injury. That injury would become a lifelong battle, affecting his mood and mental health. But instead of pulling away from the sport, Austin leaned in harder. Climbing became the thing that helped him quiet the noise in his head. Eventually, he left college to pursue climbing full-time and fully embraced free soloing, climbing sheer rock faces with no safety equipment whatsoever. His skill was remarkable and his commitment unmatched. He would often complete dozens of climbs in a single day, choosing routes that would terrify even seasoned professionals. To Austin, this wasn't about recklessness, it was about clarity. Climbing stripped life down to its purest form, one move at a time. That Sunday, photographer Ben Wu joined Austin as he tackled familiar routes like Dopey Duck and Golden Rule. After Ben left, Austin continued on. Witnesses later saw him near the steepest part of a tough climb, possibly the route known as Energizer. Dressed in his signature tie-dye and cap, Austin made a dynamic move toward a flake, a risky maneuver by any standard. Suddenly, something went wrong. A scream cut through the air. He fell 80 feet. Climbers Collins and Massey rushed to the scene, rappelling down to reach him. Massey tried CPR, but the injuries were catastrophic. Emergency responders arrived about 90 minutes later and pronounced him dead around 1:30 p.m. Officials would later describe that section of the mountain as extremely technical, where even the slightest mistake or a broken hold could prove fatal. For those who knew him, the shock of his death came with a haunting familiarity. His mother, Terry Zinga Jackson, had long feared this outcome, especially after his earlier injuries, which doctors said compromised his balance and hearing. But Austin was relentless. He'd even cut off his neck brace and casts to get back on the rock within weeks of recovery. Through his blog and social media, Austin didn't just showcase climbs, he shared his soul. He spoke candidly about mental health, risk, and the fragile balance between passion and danger. Life is an inherently dangerous sport, he often said, a mantra that summed up how he lived. Tributes poured in from climbers across the world. To them, Austin wasn't just a climber, he was a mentor, a friend, and a symbol of unapologetic, raw courage. In March 1981, Carl McCahon, a 35-year-old wildlife photographer, set out on what he believed would be a solitary yet fulfilling expedition into the heart of Alaska's Brooks Range. With a passion for capturing the raw beauty of the wilderness, he arrived fully equipped, carrying 500 rolls of film, 1,400 pounds of provisions, and multiple firearms, prepared for what he thought would be an unforgettable summer. But a critical oversight would seal his fate, leaving him trapped, alone, and helpless in the unforgiving Alaskan wild. McCahon, originally from Texas, was no stranger to adventure. In 1976, he'd already spent 5 months alone in the Brooks Range, an experience that likely instilled in him a sense of confidence, perhaps too much confidence. This time, however, he made one fatal miscalculation. He believed he had arranged for a friend to pick him up at summer's end, but he never confirmed his return flight. Unbeknownst to him, the pilot he had paid for plane repairs had never actually been scheduled to bring him home. As spring gave way to summer, McCahon documented his journey in meticulous detail. His diary began as an awe-filled account of the thriving wildlife around him. But by August, his entries started to reveal a slow, creeping dread. "I think I should have used more foresight about arranging my departure," he wrote, an early sign that he was beginning to realize the gravity of his mistake. As the days passed and the plane never arrived, McConn's situation became increasingly dire. His supplies dwindled, and with autumn approaching, nights grew colder. He tried to stretch his rations by hunting ducks and muskrats, and even drying caribou meat from a carcass he found. Yet, despite his resourcefulness, his isolation became his greatest enemy. In late August, a glimmer of hope appeared in the sky. A small plane circled above his camp. It was an Alaska State Trooper, spotting his remote campsite. But McConn, unaware of the life or death weight of his actions, waved his orange sleeping bag casually, unknowingly signaling, "All okay, do not wait." His only chance at rescue vanished into the sky. As fall tightened its grip, McConn's journal reflected his descent from determination to desperation. Hunting became nearly impossible, as wolves and foxes competed for the little game that remained. His frostbitten hands struggled with even the most basic tasks. The cold gnawed at him relentlessly, and hunger sapped his strength. His once detailed diary entries became short, frantic scribbles, his handwriting growing shaky and uneven. By November, with no food left and his body wasting away, the thought of trekking 75 miles to Fort Yukon became a fantasy rather than a plan. His writing turned to hopelessness, his words filled with the fear of being forgotten, lost forever in the vast, empty wilderness. Near Thanksgiving, McConn described crushing weakness, dizzy spells, and relentless chills. With the last of his fuel, he lit a final fire, scrawling a farewell message in his diary. He pinned his Alaska driver's license to his last note, leaving behind instructions for his undeveloped film and a humble prayer for forgiveness. Then, in the silence of the frozen wild, he ended his own life. On February 2, 1982, a month-long search, initiated by concerned friends, led Alaska State Troopers to his camp. His tent was buried under snow, its entrance sealed by the harsh winter. Inside, they found his lifeless, emaciated body, preserved by the cold. His diary, over 100 pages long, chronicled the slow, harrowing decline of a man once filled with wonder and determination, reduced to a soul consumed by solitude and despair. The coroner's inquest would later confirm what his last pages had already revealed. Carl McConn had perished, not from the cruelty of nature, but from the crushing weight of isolation, hunger, and the realization that rescue would never come. On July 25, 2019, the world lost a bright young soul in a heartbreaking and deeply unsettling way. Alana Cutland, a 19-year-old Cambridge University student, met a tragic fate when she fell from a small plane into the dense, untamed jungles of Madagascar. What was supposed to be an incredible research adventure turned into an unimaginable nightmare. Alana was not your average college student. This second-year natural sciences whiz from Milton Keynes, England, was a lover of nature, a fearless explorer, and an independent spirit with a deep passion for discovering the unknown. She had set off on a solo research expedition to Madagascar with an ambitious goal: to study a rare species of crustaceans. Self-funded and determined, she embraced every challenge that came her way with an infectious enthusiasm that inspired those around her. Her family and friends described her as intelligent, adventurous, and always eager to learn more about the world. Her trip to Madagascar was a testament to her dedication and curiosity. She had carefully planned a 6-week study in Anjajavi, a remote and biodiverse region perfect for her research. However, her journey took an alarming turn after only 8 days. Something was wrong. Reports suggest that Alana started experiencing severe mental and physical distress, paranoia, confusion, and disorientation. The likely culprit? A reaction to doxycycline, an anti-malarial medication known to cause psychological side effects in rare cases. Her once sharp and inquisitive mind seemed to be battling something far beyond her control. As her condition worsened, her deeply concerned parents, back home in England, began receiving bizarre and unsettling phone calls from their daughter. Worried out of their minds and unable to help from thousands of miles away, they made the difficult decision to bring her home early. A private plane was arranged to take her from Anjajavi to the capital, Antananarivo, where she would catch a flight back to England. Accompanying her on this crucial flight were Ruth Johnson, a trusted family friend, and the pilot, Mahefa Tahina Rantoanina. On the morning of July 25th, the small Cessna aircraft took off, carrying 3 passengers. But what should have been a simple flight to safety quickly spiraled into chaos. Alana, visibly unwell and restless, unbuckled her seatbelt mid-flight and reached for the door. Panic erupted. Both Ruth and the pilot desperately tried to stop her, struggling against her distress and confusion. Despite their frantic efforts, Alana managed to break free, and in a moment that defied belief, she fell from the plane at an altitude of 3,700 feet, disappearing into the vast, unforgiving jungle below. A massive search operation was launched, but with thick forests, treacherous terrain, and an abundance of wildlife, the odds of finding her were slim. Days passed, and hope dwindled. But then, a local tribe made a grim discovery. Alana's remains were found, bringing at least a small measure of closure to her grieving loved ones. Her family, devastated beyond words, remembered her as a brilliant and independent young woman with a zest for life and an unrelenting passion for knowledge. The investigation that followed raised pressing questions about the potential dangers of anti-malarial medications. Could doxycycline have triggered Alana's tragic reaction? Her uncle, Lester Riley, believed so. He explained how her last phone calls had been filled with confusion and incoherence, suggesting a severe psychological reaction to the medication. Experts weighed in, acknowledging that while such side effects were rare, they could be devastating. Alana's case became a chilling reminder of the unseen mental health risks that medications can pose, especially for young travelers navigating unfamiliar environments. Beyond the medical concerns, Alana's story also underscored the immense psychological toll of isolation and stress. Though she was passionate about her research, the loneliness of being in a remote location, coupled with her deteriorating mental state, may have magnified her distress. Her family's attempts to support her were limited by distance, leaving them helpless as they tried to reach out through phone calls alone. Her tragic passing shed light on the importance of mental health awareness for travelers. It emphasized the need for better safety measures, proper medication monitoring, and increased support for those experiencing distress in foreign lands. Alana's family strongly believed that her actions were not deliberate, but rather the result of an overwhelming and uncontrollable medical condition. To those who knew and loved her, Alana was much more than the victim of an unfortunate tragedy. She was a vibrant, intelligent, and courageous young woman with a boundless curiosity for the world. Her untimely death was a heartbreaking loss, but her legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the need to prioritize mental health, especially for those embarking on challenging and adventurous journeys. Her story continues to resonate, urging people to take precautions, stay informed, and look out for one another when exploring the world. On July 18, 2023, Steve Curry, a 71-year-old retired electrician from Sunland, California, set out on what would be his final adventure in the unforgiving terrain of Death Valley National Park. Known for its scorching heat and extreme conditions, Death Valley is one of the hottest places on Earth, with temperatures frequently soaring above 100 Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius. On this particular day, the thermometer hit a brutal 121 Fahrenheit, 49 Celsius. But for Steve, the desert wasn't something to fear. It was another opportunity for adventure. An avid outdoorsman, Steve had spent years hiking, rock climbing, and mountain biking, and was no stranger to challenging terrains. He approached the desert's dangers with determination, believing that the beauty of nature was worth the effort. That morning, Steve had a conversation with a reporter from the Los Angeles Times at Zabriskie Point. He stood in the shade, casually acknowledging the intense heat but showing no signs of backing down. With sunscreen on, a sun hat shielding his face, and an unwavering resolve, Steve began his hike from Golden Canyon to Zabriskie Point. a popular trail known for its breathtaking views, but also its demanding climbs. Despite the brutal heat, Steve didn't hesitate. To him, the challenge was part of the thrill. But by 3:40 p.m., tragedy struck. After completing his hike, Steve was found unresponsive near a restroom at the Golden Canyon trailhead. A fellow hiker saw him and immediately called for help. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, performing CPR and using a defibrillator in an attempt to revive him. Sadly, despite their best efforts, Steve could not be revived and was declared dead at the scene. The cause of Steve's death was linked to the extreme heat of the area, with temperatures at Furnace Creek reaching 121 degrees Fahrenheit. Experts believed the heat within the canyon itself was even more intense due to the canyon walls trapping and radiating the sun's energy. This made the already dangerous conditions even more hazardous. Steve's death was part of a larger pattern of tragic incidents that plagued national parks during the summer of 2023. Just days before, another person was found lifeless in their car in Death Valley when the air conditioning failed. A teenager in Alaska's Kenai Fjords National Park and a man in Colorado's Rocky Mountain National Park also lost their lives under similar distressing conditions. Despite his experience, Steve's determination to finish the hike without accepting offers of assistance from other hikers earlier that day ultimately led to his untimely demise. His adventurous spirit, always pushing himself to keep up with younger hikers, was part of what made him who he was. But on this day, it wasn't enough to overcome the extreme heat. At home, his wife Rayma had no idea Steve was venturing out to Death Valley that day. While she didn't share his love for hiking, she always supported his outdoor pursuits. After Steve didn't return that evening, Rayma grew worried. It wasn't until 2 days later that she received the heartbreaking news from the coroner's office. Reflecting on their nearly 30 years of marriage, Rayma described Steve as a warm, adventurous person with a deep connection to nature. She could never have imagined that his passion for the outdoors would lead to such a tragic end. Steve's passing occurred during a severe heat wave that had been gripping the southwestern United States for weeks. Death Valley's temperatures had been regularly surpassing 110 Fahrenheit, creating perilous conditions even for experienced hikers. Despite warnings from the National Park Service advising against strenuous activities during peak heat, many visitors still underestimated the dangers. Though Steve had taken some precautions, wearing sunscreen, carrying water, and dressing appropriately, the intensity of the heat proved overwhelming. When the body's core temperature exceeds 104 Fahrenheit, 40 Celsius, heat-related illness can set in rapidly, particularly in a place like Death Valley, where the environment is as hostile as it is beautiful. Steve's story is a somber reminder of nature's unpredictable power, no matter how prepared you think you are. Even a seasoned adventurer like Steve couldn't escape the desert's brutal grasp. On June 30th, 2019, Austin Howell, a renowned free solo climber, set out on what was meant to be another exhilarating ascent. Another day pushing the limits of human capability. But by midday, the unforgiving cliffs of Shortoff Mountain in North Carolina would bear witness to a devastating fall, one that would silence a man who had spent his life dancing with danger. Austin, 31, was not just another climber. Born in Friendswood, Texas, he discovered his passion for the vertical world at 19 while attending the University of Houston. From the moment he touched rock, it became his obsession, his calling. But his path was not without hardship. In 2008, a horrific 35-foot fall at an indoor climbing gym shattered his body, fractured vertebrae, broken bones, and a traumatic brain injury that left lasting scars. He fought through the pain, through depression, through the weight of a world that told him to stop. But stopping was never an option. Climbing wasn't just a sport to Austin Howell, it was survival. It was clarity in chaos. By 2019, Austin had become a legend in the world of free soloing, scaling sheer rock faces with no ropes, no harnesses, only his skill, his mind, and the raw power of his fingers grasping stone. His days were filled with daring ascents, moving gracefully across cliffs that most wouldn't dare to touch without extensive protection. To him, it wasn't recklessness. It was art. It was therapy. It was life. That summer morning, Howell arrived at Shortoff Mountain with photographer Ben Wu. The air was thick with humidity, the cliffs towering and unforgiving. Austin began his ascent, a vibrant tie-dye shirt clinging to his back, his cap pulled low over determined eyes. He soloed Dopey Duck and Golden Rule with effortless precision, his movements fluid, calculated. Wu snapped photos as Howell navigated the rock with the confidence of a man who knew no fear. Then, as the sun climbed higher, Wu departed. Austin stayed behind. The mountain called to him. One more climb. Witnesses later recalled seeing him on one of the most treacherous sections of the cliff, attempting a bold move to a delicate flake. A split second, a single miscalculation, a scream tore through the stillness of the gorge as his grip failed. Austin Howell plummeted 80 feet, his body twisting through the air before colliding with the unforgiving earth below. Nearby climbers, stunned by the sudden violence of the fall, rushed to his side. Collins and Massey, two fellow climbers, rappelled down the rock face, their hearts pounding as they reached him. Massey attempted CPR, but the damage was catastrophic. The life that had burned so brightly, that had defied gravity and odds time and time again, was extinguished. By the time emergency responders arrived 90 minutes later, there was nothing left to do but pronounce him dead. The climbing world was shattered. Austin Howell had lived on the edge of existence, always aware of the risks, always pushing forward despite them. His mother, Terry Zynga Jackson, had long feared this day. After his first brutal accident in 2008, she had begged him to reconsider, to step away from the danger. But Howell had been resolute, cutting off his casts, removing his neck brace, and climbing again within weeks. To him, there was no alternative. Life was an inherently dangerous sport, he often said, a phrase he lived by until his final breath. In the days that followed, tributes poured in from across the climbing community. Friends and fans described Howell as more than a climber. He was a mentor, an inspiration, a force of nature who embraced life with an intensity most could only dream of. His Instagram, once filled with breathtaking images and introspective musings, became a digital memorial, a place where his followers mourned, celebrated, and honored his legacy. Some would call it inevitable, an end written in the fabric of free soloing itself. But to those who knew him, Austin Howell was not just a man who chased danger. He was a man who found meaning in the impossible, who sought peace on the edge of oblivion. And in his final moments, on the face of that mountain, he was exactly where he had always belonged, free. On a stark October evening in Sweden's Lapland region, the call of adventure ended in tragedy for 22-year-old YouTuber Storm Debul, who was found dead following a brutal snowstorm. Known online as Storm Outdoorsy, Debul had garnered a small but loyal following by documenting his solo hiking and camping expeditions across Northern Europe. His haunting final messages to friends and family now serve as a chilling testament to the dangers of his chosen passion. Debul had been hiking alone when the severe storm descended, trapping him in its icy grip. In a video sent to a friend as the tempest raged, he narrated the conditions with an unnerving mix of calm and unease. The wind howled against his tent, and snow had already crept into his boots. "Tonight it's going to get worse. Jesus Christ," he said, his voice carrying a grim acknowledgement of what lay ahead. As the storm intensified, Debul reached out to emergency services, reporting injuries and pleading for help. However, the ferocity of the weather delayed rescuers until the following day. By then, it was too late. On October 30th, search teams found his lifeless body, exposed to the elements with no shelter in sight. A broken nose hinted at the ordeal he endured, but the full story of his final hours remained shrouded in the snowy wilderness. For his family, the loss is a wound deepened by the vivid imagination of his suffering. He must have suffered for a long time and died alone. I keep imagining his last moments. It devastates me, his mother, Elizabeth Raidmaker, said in an emotional statement. His father, Bout, echoed her grief, expressing a desperate hope to recover his son's camera, which might contain the last chapters of his life story. DeBull's YouTube channel, which he had launched only 3 months earlier, showcased his love for nature and solitude. Despite having just over 1,100 subscribers, his videos resonated with viewers who admired his adventurous spirit. In his last message to his grandmother, DeBull sought to reassure her, texting, "It's snowing heavily here. But don't worry, I'll survive, you know." The words now carry a tragic irony, showing the fine line between confidence and vulnerability in the wild. The snowstorm's severity not only claimed DeBull's life, but also delayed his family's efforts to retrieve his belongings. His father remains determined to find his camera, believing it holds invaluable memories of his son's final journey. "His videos are a priceless legacy for us," Boat said. But now his camera is there, somewhere in the snow, full of images from his very last trek. I would love nothing more than to get it back. Storm DeBull's story shows the unpredictable power of nature and the risks inherent in pushing personal boundaries. While his death is a profound loss to his loved ones and the community he inspired, his legacy endures in the spirit of exploration and resilience that defined his short but impactful life. His final trek, though marked by tragedy, serves as both a cautionary tale and a tribute to the indomitable human desire to connect with the natural world. It was New Year's Day, 2008, a crisp morning in the Blue Ridge Mountains of northern Georgia. Meredith Hope Emerson, a spirited 24-year-old University of Georgia graduate, decided to kick off her year with a hike on Blood Mountain. An experienced outdoorswoman, she brought her trusty Labrador mix, Ella, along for company. Armed with confidence, skill, and her furry sidekick, Meredith set out from the Vogel State Park trailhead, ready for an invigorating day in the Appalachian wilderness. The hike was scenic, the trails serene, and the air laced with the promise of fresh beginnings. Along the way, Meredith exchanged greetings with fellow hikers, including a gray-haired man accompanied by a red dog. It was a passing moment, hardly worth noting, until later. When Meredith didn't return home that evening, her friends grew anxious. By January 2nd, their calls to her phone went unanswered, and her absence prompted a missing persons report. Authorities swung into action, quickly locating Meredith's car at the trailhead. What began as a hopeful search soon turned grim when searchers discovered scattered items along the trail: water bottles, dog treats, and evidence of a struggle. This wasn't just a case of someone lost in the woods. Witnesses recalled seeing a man with a red dog near where Meredith had vanished. The description fit Gary Michael Hilton, a 61-year-old drifter with a reputation for haunting remote trails. A survivalist with a sinister history, Hilton roamed the forests with his dog and more baggage than anyone suspected. On January 4th, Hilton's luck ran out when a gas station attendant recognized him cleaning out his van and called the police. A search of his van revealed blood evidence, confirming Meredith had been there. Under mounting pressure, Hilton confessed and offered details in exchange for sparing himself the death penalty. He led investigators to Meredith's remains on January 7th, bringing a tragic conclusion to the search. According to Hilton, he'd approached Meredith on the trail, brandishing a knife and baton to demand her ATM card. But Meredith wasn't one to go down without a fight. Using her martial arts training, she fiercely resisted, even breaking Hilton's hand in the process. Her bravery slowed him down, but ultimately he overpowered her. Hilton held Meredith captive in his van for 3 harrowing days, repeatedly attempting to withdraw money with the incorrect pins she'd intentionally provided. Her quick thinking created an electronic breadcrumb trail that helped authorities close in. Tragically, realizing he couldn't release her, Hilton decided to take her life, tying her to a tree with false promises of freedom before committing the unthinkable. In the days that followed, investigators uncovered Hilton's dark past. He was linked to the murders of Cheryl Dunlap in Florida's Apalachicola National Forest and elderly hikers John and Irene Bryant in North Carolina. Hilton's reign of terror across southeastern national forests ended with his arrest, and he was sentenced to life in prison, currently on death row in Florida. Meredith's story left a lasting legacy. Her loved ones founded the Right to Hike organization, advocating for trail safety and emergency resources. Ella, Meredith's beloved dog, was found alive near a dumpster and became a cherished member of her family. Though her life was tragically cut short, Meredith's courage and spirit continue to inspire efforts to make the great outdoors a safer place for all. The mountains may be beautiful, but her story reminds us they can also be perilous, and not just because of the terrain. On a crisp, cold morning in October 2022, in the shadow of the towering Garhwal Himalayas, a group of climbers set out with the hope of summiting Draupadi Ka Danda 2, DKD2, a daunting peak rising to 18,600 feet. But for some, that ambition would be their last, as an avalanche of unimaginable force swept through them, leaving devastation in its wake. Ankush Sharma, only 23 years old, was one of the climbers that morning. As part of an advanced mountaineering course with the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering, EM, Sharma was prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, though no one could have predicted the deadly force that would strike. The group had set off early, just after 3:30 a.m. from Camp 1, nestled at 15,800 feet. As the climbers ascended into the early darkness, their headlamps flickered like fireflies against the snow. The air was thin, and the temperature was dropping, but they pressed on. Among the climbers was Sunil Lalwani, a 28-year-old former marketing professional who had left the bustle of city life for the silence of the mountains. For him, climbing DKD2 wasn't just a challenge, it was a chance to test his limits. Deep Thakkar, also 28, was determined to reach the summit of DKD2, his first 5,000-meter peak. A fund manager by trade, Thakkar had relocated to Himachal Pradesh to pursue his passion for mountaineering. The summit beckoned, promising to make their dreams a reality. The weather that day was deceptively calm. Snow fell lightly in the early hours, a slight breeze that the climbers barely noticed. By the time they reached Rambo Rock at 16,800 feet, the team had clipped into their first fixed rope, making their way up through a rocky section, carefully avoiding cracks in the glacier below. As dawn's first light began to creep over the horizon, a sense of cautious optimism filled the air. The group moved in tight formation, each climber following the other, ropes connecting them in a lifeline. Their progress was slow, but steady. The snow was deep, and the climb was grueling. But the summit came into view, a sight that filled Thakkar's heart with exhilaration. The final stretch lay ahead. At 8:30 a.m., Sharma reached the summit snowfield and unclipped himself from the fixed line. He was nearly there, just a few more steps. But then, without warning, disaster struck. A deep crack, almost imperceptible, ripped through the slope above them. It released a massive avalanche, cascading downward like a roaring beast. The avalanche moved with brutal force. What had been a hopeful ascent turned into a chaotic nightmare in an instant. Snow and ice tore down the mountainside, sweeping climbers off their feet. Thakkar, just below, could do nothing but watch in horror as his companions were taken by the slide. Lalwani, tangled in the snow, plunged his ice axe into the freezing slope, desperately trying to arrest the slide. But it was futile. The snow surged around him, and within moments he too was consumed by the wave of ice and snow. Sharma, nearing the summit, turned back in confusion. His world, once filled with hope, had gone eerily silent. The fixed ropes, their only connection to the others, were gone. His friends were gone. There was no sound, no cries for help, just the haunting silence of the mountain. What happened? Sharma would later reflect. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and everything happened in silence. The avalanche, relentless and indiscriminate, tore through the climbers. The once calm and exhilarating climb turned into a desperate fight for survival. The mountain claimed more than just their dreams. It took lives, erasing them as if they had never been there at all. In the aftermath, rescue operations began, but the damage had already been done. The avalanche had stolen everything. Lives, aspirations, and the hope of a successful summit all vanished in an instant. The tragedy was felt not only by the climbers' families and loved ones, but by the mountaineering community itself, shaken by the raw power of nature and the unforgiving realities of high-altitude climbing. DKD-2, though less notorious than its towering neighbors like Thalay Sagar and Meru, proved that no peak, no matter the height, was safe from the deadly forces of the Himalayas. This tragedy would serve as a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability, a warning that in the mountains, even the best laid plans can come undone in the blink of an eye. It was July 19th, 2025, in Yosemite National Park, a place people visit to feel alive, not to come face to face with death. Angela Lin, a 29-year-old Google software engineer, was on a simple weekend hike with her boyfriend, David Hua, and two close friends. Alumni Grove was supposed to be peaceful, a trail filled with ancient sequoias, glowing in the warm California sun. Nothing dangerous, nothing unusual, just a quiet walk through giants. Angela was the careful one in the group. She followed every rule, read every sign, stayed on marked paths. The weather was perfect blue sky, still air, not even a hint of wind. But, as everyone would soon learn, nature doesn't always give warnings. They were standing near the trees, admiring the view, when a single sound cut through the quiet, a loud, sharp crack from above. David later said it happened in only 2 or 3 seconds. A sound, a blur, then chaos. Massive branches began crashing down like spears. One of them struck Angela. David closed his eyes for a split second, and when he opened them, she was on the ground, face up, blood spreading beneath her head. She wasn't moving. He dropped to his knees, calling her name, begging her to breathe. He dialed 911 with shaking hands, then fought desperately to keep her alive, performing CPR until a ranger arrived. But paramedics later said the truth no one wanted to hear. Angela likely died instantly. The impact had been too severe. The sheriff's office confirmed her death as accidental blunt force injuries, a falling tree branch on a windless day on a safe trail. Officials closed the area for a week, but even now, they haven't explained what made the branch fall. Angela's boyfriend says the Park Service has offered almost no answers. His frustration grew so heavy, he eventually turned to the media, demanding to know how something like this could happen without any warning at all. A tourist who witnessed the aftermath wrote on Reddit that the memory haunted them since. They said the group wasn't doing anything wrong. Life can be so cruel, they wrote. Angela's own story made the loss feel even heavier. She graduated from UC Berkeley, earned her master's at UT Austin, worked at Salesforce, then joined Google, where colleagues remembered her as brilliant, gentle, and uplifting. She was the kind of person who brought chocolate to late-night study sessions just to keep everyone smiling. She loved swing dancing, singing, hiking. She loved life, and she loved David. They had known each other since college. He said she was the most cautious person he had ever met, which is why this didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a nightmare. One moment of silence, one crack of wood, one instant that changed everything. Yosemite has seen falling tree fatalities before, but Angela's case was different. No storm, no wind, no rotten trunk, no warning at all. The investigation continues, but the people who loved her are left with nothing. No answers, no closure, just grief and a question no one can answer. How can someone die when they're doing everything right? Angela Lin was 29. Brilliant, loved, careful, hopeful. She wasn't climbing cliffs or crossing rivers. She wasn't taking risks. She was just standing under a tree, and in one silent moment her life was gone. It was April 23, 2025, at Purgatory Chasm State Reservation in Sutton, Massachusetts, a rugged, scenic place known for its dramatic rock formations and narrow, uneven trails. That afternoon, 49-year-old Carolyn Carey Sanger had planned a simple family outing. A devoted mother of 4 from Topsfield, she arrived with 3 of her children and her brother for what was meant to be a joyful hike together in nature. Carey loved the outdoors and had always embraced wellness in every part of her life. After years of working as an oncology nurse, she had recently transitioned into a new chapter, opening her own wellness studio, Balanced Body, in Topsfield, where she practiced massage therapy and Reiki healing. This hike was supposed to be a break, a peaceful few hours with the people she loved most. But at 1:45 p.m., everything changed. A 911 call was placed to Sutton Police. A woman had fallen between 50 and 75 feet into the chasm. That woman was Carrie. Rescue crews responded quickly. The chasm, carved deep into solid rock, is a quarter-mile long and surrounded by sheer cliffs and narrow ledges. By the time emergency responders reached her, several nearby hikers, some with medical training, were already attempting to save her. They had witnessed the fall and rushed to help, but her injuries were catastrophic. Carrie was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities confirmed that the fall occurred in full view of her 3 children. In the chaos that followed, they ran to find park rangers who called in state police and rescue teams. Her husband, Michael Sanger, was notified soon after. Investigators determined the fall to be accidental. A family friend, Tim Powley, later said, "It was just a trip, a loss of footing. That part of the trail is especially difficult. Purgatory Chasm, with its sharp drops and exposed rock ledges, has long drawn adventurous hikers." One visitor, Andy Spears, noted, "There are trails above the chasm with dangerous overhangs. If you go too close to the edge to look down, it's risky. It's so sad something like this happened here." Carrie had no known health issues. Officials believe a simple misstep on treacherous ground was enough to cause the fatal fall. Even with the fast response, nothing more could be done. News of her passing spread quickly across the Topsfield community. Friends and loved ones described Carrie as kind, selfless, and full of light. A GoFundMe campaign organized by family friend Brooke Powley raised over $100,000 in just days. "She was a bright light," Brooke wrote, "a wonderful, selfless mother who raised 4 incredible, respectful, responsible kids." Her husband, Michael, later spoke to the press, wearing one of Carrie's shirts. "She was amazing," he said, "the brightness and light on a dark day for a lot of people." The two had met in college and were preparing to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. Carrie's impact stretched far beyond her family. As a nurse, therapist, and healer, she was someone people trusted in their most vulnerable moments. Friend and colleague Molly Schur remembered her as someone who could light up a room and make you feel safe. She had recently stepped away from nursing to focus fully on her wellness practice, renovating her studio by hand, proud of what she had created. In 2016, Carrie and Michael were featured in a local news segment about veterans. Michael, an Iraq War veteran, credited Carrie with helping him through his darkest times. Another friend, Catherine Schonfarber, wrote, "Carrie was a radiant presence, a healer, a teacher, a friend whose kindness touched countless lives. For the Sanger family and for everyone who knew her, the loss is overwhelming. A place known for its wild beauty became the setting of an unimaginable tragedy." Carrie spent her final moments surrounded by nature and the people she loved, and in the days that followed, her family held tightly to memories, to photos, and to the warmth she left behind. In October 2018, 29-year-old Jordan Greider, an experienced outdoorsman from Moriarty, New Mexico, set out on what would be his most ambitious journey yet. His plan? To camp alone through the brutal winter in northern Minnesota's remote Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment adventure. This was something Jordan had been preparing for his entire adult life. Jordan wasn't your average guy. He was the third of 6 brothers and had spent more than a decade mastering survival skills in the wilds of Kentucky and upstate New York. He didn't consider himself homeless. He said he had a home, but simply preferred to live outside. Off-grid living, self-reliance, and solitude weren't just hobbies for Jordan. They were his way of life. In September 2018, he celebrated his birthday with family. A month later, he headed into the Minnesota wilderness alone. He brought with him gear, supplies, and the mindset to survive one of the harshest winters in the U.S. His family, familiar with his independent streak, still couldn't help but worry. On October 8th, Jordan sent them a photo of a peaceful beaver pond near his chosen camp. It was the last time they'd ever hear from him. Later that month, Jordan's white truck was found parked near a locked gate along the Sioux Hustler Trail, packed with supplies. Local authorities, concerned by the lack of communication, began searching. But with winter closing in fast, conditions quickly became too treacherous to continue. The snow buried the trail and the truth. Then, in April 2019, as the snow finally began to melt, conservation officer Sean Williams stumbled across a haunting sight. On a remote, south-facing slope, he found a primitive campsite. A hammock hung under a green tarp. Blood stained the sleeping bag beneath it. A loaded 9mm Beretta pistol lay nearby, untouched. Around the camp, there were wolf tracks and scat, but no sign of Jordan. As the thaw continued, investigators uncovered more. Scattered across the area were fragments of Jordan's remains, 12 bones in total. His skull was never found. The scene offered more questions than answers. The campsite appeared hastily assembled. The tarp and hammock were intact, suggesting there hadn't been a struggle. The blood, however, told a different story. This was no minor injury. One theory suggested a wolf attack. His mother, Rebecca Grider, believed Jordan may have been ambushed in his sleep, but researchers, including wolf expert Thomas Gable, were skeptical. Fatal wolf attacks in Minnesota are virtually unheard of, and the condition of the campsite didn't align with the chaos such an attack would cause. Another possibility was a tragic accident. Jordan was known to keep his knives razor sharp. Some speculated he might have cut himself severely, perhaps while carving or shaving. Makeshift bandages were found near the tent, hinting at an attempt to treat an injury, but no bloody knife was ever located, and the sheer volume of blood in the hammock suggested the wound was far more than a small slip. Foul play officially ruled out, but the untouched gun and absence of defensive injuries left a sliver of doubt. Some even floated bizarre theories. Mythical creatures like Sasquatch or the Wendigo were mentioned online. These ideas stayed in the realm of speculation, never supported by evidence. In May 2019, Jordan's family visited the site. It was a somber journey. Rebecca noted that there were no wood shavings around the camp. Strange, since Jordan was always carving something. To her, this suggested he'd only spent one night there. Despite cadaver dogs and intensive searches, most of Jordan's remains were never found. The case was eventually closed, with no conclusive cause of death. But for those who knew and loved him, the mystery still lingers. Was Jordan the victim of nature, an accident, or something we may never understand? Jamaica, with its sun-kissed beaches, pulsating reggae beats, and endless supply of tropical drinks, was the perfect getaway for 53-year-old Timothy Southern from Lichfield, Staffordshire. In May 2022, he landed at the Royal Decameron Club Caribbean in St. Lucia, and with his family, ready to soak up the warm island vibes. Days were spent basking in the sun, dipping in the ocean, and feasting on local delicacies, while evenings buzzed with music, laughter, and an array of colorful cocktails. One night, Timothy, feeling the island spirit, found himself in the middle of a drinking challenge with two fellow guests. The mission? Conquer all 21 cocktails on the menu in one sitting. Having already indulged in brandy and beer earlier in the day, one might think he'd call it a night, but the thrill of the challenge was just too tempting. The drinks flowed, the toasts kept coming, and the energy was infectious. Not typically a heavy drinker, Timothy dove into the challenge with enthusiasm. But after 12 cocktails, the mix of booze, heat, and sheer excitement began taking its toll. He started feeling wobbly, yet the buzz of the evening kept him going. Eventually, reality hit hard. He waved the white flag, said his goodbyes, and staggered back to his room, the resort's palm trees swaying, or was that just the alcohol? His family, unaware of just how much he had consumed, assumed he was simply exhausted from a long day. But once in his room, things took a turn for the worse. That lightheaded tipsiness transformed into a full-blown emergency. His stomach rebelled, nausea kicked in, and he struggled to stay coherent. In a desperate attempt to feel better, he tried to force himself to vomit but quickly found himself in trouble. A family member, sensing something was seriously wrong, rushed to his aid, placing him in the recovery position. Panic set in as his condition worsened. His breathing became shallow, his skin turned cold and clammy, and his family, now in full crisis mode, pleaded for help. A nurse finally arrived, but shockingly, no ambulance had been called. As precious minutes slipped away, the family begged for action. When the nurse finally began chest compressions, it was too late. Timothy's pulse was weak, his body unresponsive, and their worst fears became reality. He was gone. The cause of death? Acute gastroenteritis due to excessive alcohol consumption, a clinical explanation for an utterly heartbreaking loss. The Southern family's dream vacation had turned into an unthinkable nightmare. Their grief was compounded by anger, believing the resort had failed them, not only by allowing such reckless drinking but also by its delayed response. And as if fate hadn't been cruel enough, their travel insurance didn't cover repatriation, forcing them to start a GoFundMe to bring Timothy home, a paradise lost in every sense of the word. On July 27, 2023, Muhammad Hassan, a 27-year-old porter from Pakistan, found himself in a life-or-death struggle on Karakoram 2, K2, the world's second highest and one of its deadliest peaks. K2 is infamous for its brutal weather, steep ascents, and unpredictable avalanches, challenging even the most experienced climbers. But Hassan wasn't there for adventure or glory. He was there to provide for his wife, 3 children, and elderly grandmother. He had recently joined the Layla Peak expedition as a part of the rope-fixing crew, a high-risk but essential role in any major climb. His task was to secure ropes along the ascent, making it safer for climbers following behind. That night, at around 2:30 a.m., he joined dozens of climbers navigating the bottleneck, a notorious section just below the Great Serac, where ice falls and avalanches are constant threats. Unlike the elite climbers around him, Hassan lacked proper high-altitude training and had inadequate gear. Fellow climbers and Sherpas had warned him about the dangers, but he pressed on, determined to fulfill his duty. At some point during the climb, Hassan slipped and fell, leaving him trapped upside down at over 8,000 meters, 26,000 feet above sea level. The freezing temperatures, lack of oxygen, and sheer exhaustion quickly took their toll. To make matters worse, his oxygen mask broke, leaving him barely able to breathe. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and soon he was unable to move or call for help. As the night passed, dozens of climbers continued ascending past him, some attempting to break records, others chasing personal milestones, but almost none stopping to assist. Only 2 individuals, Tenjin Sherpa and Gabriel Tarso, made an effort to help. Tenjin tried to keep Hassan conscious, but as conditions worsened and his own oxygen supply dwindled, he was forced to abandon the effort. Tarso, a cameraman, also struggled with his own breathing and had no choice but to move on. Despite Hassan still being alive for hours after his fall, no coordinated rescue effort was made. Meanwhile, climbers stepped over his motionless body, determined to reach the summit at any cost. The harsh reality of high-altitude mountaineering became painfully clear when Norwegian climber Kristin Harila, who was on a record-setting quest to summit all 14 peaks above 8,000 meters, reached the top of K2 later that day. She later claimed that her team had tried to help but found the conditions too dangerous. However, the fact that her team continued their ascent and celebrated at the summit sparked widespread criticism. Austrian mountaineer Philipp Flamig later released footage showing Hassan still alive, further fueling the outrage. Many questioned whether Hassan would have received help if he had been a Western climber instead of a local porter. German climber Wilhelm Steindl, who had turned back earlier due to unsafe conditions, condemned the lack of action and later started a fundraiser for Hassan's family, which raised over $170,000 to support his widow and children. The backlash was so severe that Layla Peak Expeditions, the company that had hired Hassan, was banned for 2 years due to negligence. Beyond the tragedy itself, Hassan's death exposed deep flaws in the world of extreme mountaineering. While K2's conditions make rescues nearly impossible, his case raised ethical concerns about the priorities of climbers and the systemic biases faced by local porters. Porters are often the unsung heroes of high-altitude expeditions, risking their lives to enable others to achieve their dreams. Yet, they receive far less recognition, support, and protection. His story has sparked a global conversation about the moral responsibilities of climbers and the need for better safety regulations. Though K2 claimed his life, Hassan's story has left a lasting impact, serving as a call for greater humanity, accountability, and change in the dangerous world of mountaineering. In October 2018, Jordan Greer, a passionate outdoorsman from Merard, New Mexico, set out on what would become his most perilous journey. The 29-year-old had spent years mastering survival skills, pushing the limits of isolation and self-reliance. His latest challenge? To endure a brutal Minnesota winter alone in the remote and unforgiving Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. It was supposed to be the ultimate test of his abilities, but Jordan never came back. A month before his departure, Jordan celebrated his birthday with his family, a moment now frozen in time. He set off alone in early October, armed with supplies, experience, and an unshakable will. On October 8th, he sent his family a single photograph of a beaver pond near his chosen campsite, a glimpse into the world he was about to disappear into. It was his last known contact. As weeks passed without word, unease settled over his loved ones. Then a chilling clue emerged. Jordan's white truck, parked near a private gate off the Sioux Hustler Trail, packed with supplies but abandoned. Authorities launched a search, but the brutal Minnesota winter soon slammed the region with relentless snow and sub-zero temperatures, sealing Jordan's fate in ice and silence. Months passed. Hope dwindled. Then, in April 2019, with the thaw came a horrifying discovery. Sean Williams, a conservation officer, stumbled upon a makeshift campsite on a desolate, south-facing slope. What he found sent a chill through investigators. A hammock strung beneath a green tarp, a blood-soaked sleeping bag, and a loaded, but unused, 9mm Beretta pistol resting nearby. Wolf tracks circled the site, a grim reminder of nature's cruel indifference. But of Jordan himself, there was no sign. As the snow continued to melt, more clues surfaced, each more unsettling than the last. Scattered bones, just 12 in total, were found in the area. His skull, never recovered. What happened in those final moments? The evidence left behind only deepened the mystery. Jordan's mother, Rebecca Greer, believed her son had been ambushed in the dead of night by a hungry wolf pack. But experts, including Thomas Gable of the Voyageurs Wolf Project, dismissed this theory. No fatal wolf attack had been recorded in Minnesota since the 1800s. There were no signs of a struggle. If not wolves, then what? Other theories emerged, each with its own disturbing implications. Had Jordan suffered a fatal accident? His knives were known to be razor sharp. Had he cut himself while carving or shaving, bleeding out in the cold before he could call for help? Some bandage-like materials were found near the site, hinting at an attempted self-rescue, but no bloody knife was ever recovered. And could a mere wound account for the sheer volume of blood saturating his hammock? The possibility of foul play cast a long shadow over the case. Had someone followed Jordan into the wilderness, attacked him in the dead of night? Yet his gun lay untouched, no signs of struggle or defensive wounds. Could something even more sinister have happened? Online theorists took the case in eerie directions. Whispers of the Wendigo, the legendary beast of the Northwoods, and the elusive Sasquatch surfaced in hushed conversations. Could Jordan have stumbled into something not meant to be seen? In May 2019, Jordan's family made the heart-wrenching journey to the site. Standing among the remains of their son's last camp, they searched for answers that would never come. His mother noticed something chilling. There were no wood shavings, nothing to indicate he had settled in, carved or whittled as he always did. Had he only stayed for one night before meeting his fate? Despite extensive searches, much of Jordan's body was never found. No definitive cause of death was established. The authorities eventually closed the case, citing no evidence of foul play or suicide. But for those who knew Jordan, and for those who now know his story, the question lingers. Was he taken by the wilderness, by a predator, by an accident, or by something else entirely? The truth may forever be lost in the frozen silence of the Boundary Waters. The iconic Half Dome in Yosemite National Park has been a symbol of adventure and natural grandeur since the mid-1800s, when American settlers first began exploring the region. Towering 4,800 feet above Yosemite Valley, this crescent-shaped granite formation captivates visitors with its striking beauty and promises of awe-inspiring panoramic views. For many outdoor enthusiasts, reaching the summit is a bucket list achievement, representing both a physical challenge and a deep connection to nature. However, the allure of Half Dome is accompanied by significant dangers, making it one of the most challenging and hazardous hikes in the park. In September 2019, a tragic incident underscored the risks inherent in the climb. Danielle Burnett, a 29-year-old woman from Lake Havasu City, Arizona, lost her life while attempting to reach the summit. She fell 500 feet from the section of the trail where climbers must use cables to steady themselves against the steep exposed granite. According to Yosemite spokesperson Scott Gediman, Burnett lost her footing on this precarious stretch, leading to her fatal fall. Emergency responders located her body shortly after the incident, but the tragedy left an indelible mark on the hiking community and prompted park officials to investigate the circumstances surrounding her death. The Half Dome hike is widely regarded as one of Yosemite's most iconic yet physically demanding trails. Covering a grueling 17 miles round trip, it requires hikers to ascend 4,800 feet in elevation. The journey culminates in a steep, nerve-wracking climb, aided by cables bolted into the granite to assist hikers in navigating the final stretch to the summit. This last portion of the trail, while offering unmatched views, is notoriously challenging, requiring both physical endurance and mental resilience. Yosemite National Park itself describes the Half Dome route as a premier attraction, but frequently emphasizes its difficulty and the preparation necessary for a successful ascent. To manage the risks and the immense popularity of the trail, permits for the Half Dome hike are distributed through a lottery system. This approach helps limit the number of hikers on the trail each day, reducing congestion and minimizing the potential for accidents. Despite these measures, incidents still occur, often as a result of unpreparedness, overconfidence, or underestimating the trail's demands. Common issues include dehydration, fatigue, and misjudging weather conditions, all of which can quickly turn a challenging hike into a dangerous situation. The cables on Half Dome are both a lifesaver and a source of danger. Installed to provide support for climbers ascending the steep granite face, they allow hikers to pull themselves upward while maintaining balance. However, their effectiveness depends on the conditions and the hiker's experience. Rain or other weather changes can render the granite slippery and the cables difficult to grip, significantly increasing the likelihood of slips and falls. While the park recommends using a safety harness to secure oneself to the cables, this precaution is not mandatory, leaving many climbers vulnerable. Danielle Burnett's death highlighted these vulnerabilities, serving as a reminder of the risks associated with such an ambitious outdoor adventure. Burnett, like many others, was drawn to the allure of Yosemite's beauty and the personal triumph of conquering Half Dome. Her loss underscores the importance of proper preparation, situational awareness, and respect for the unpredictable nature of the wilderness. The challenges posed by Half Dome are not limited to its physical demands. Hikers must contend with environmental factors such as altitude, weather, and trail conditions. Sudden rainstorms can transform the trail into a hazardous path, while intense sunlight and heat can cause dehydration or heat exhaustion. Even experienced hikers have found themselves overwhelmed by the combination of these elements. The trail's warnings about its difficulty are not mere formalities. They are essential guidelines meant to protect lives. Despite its dangers, Half Dome continues to captivate outdoor enthusiasts from around the globe. Its towering presence and the sense of accomplishment it offers to those who reach its summit make it a compelling destination. However, this attraction must be tempered by an understanding of the challenges and a commitment to safety. For many, the climb is a transformative experience, blending the thrill of adventure with the awe of nature's raw power. For others, like Danielle Burnett, it has been tragically unforgiving. Danielle Burnett's story is a clear example of how quickly an outdoor excursion can turn tragic. Her love for the outdoors and her adventurous spirit resonate with many who share her passion. While her loss is deeply felt, it also serves as a call to action for others to prioritize safety and preparedness in their own pursuits. Half Dome's allure will undoubtedly continue to draw visitors for generations to come, but its challenges must never be underestimated. It is a place of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary risk, a combination that demands the utmost respect from all who dare to climb it. It was May 18, 1980, a seemingly normal morning in southwestern Washington. Well, if you ignored the rumbling volcano. Robert Landsberg, a 48-year-old photographer from Portland, Oregon, had been camped out near Mount St. Helens for weeks. He wasn't there for the fresh mountain air. He was hoping to capture what geologists were ominously predicting, a catastrophic eruption. Armed with his camera and a gut feeling, he was just 4 miles from the summit, closer than most would dare. For months, Mount St. Helens had been putting on a show. Since March, small earthquakes had been rattling the area, and a massive bulge on the mountain's northeastern slope was expanding 5 feet a day. To scientists, photographers, and thrill-seekers, it was like a slow-motion countdown to chaos. Landsberg, ever the dedicated photographer, had spent weeks documenting the drama, undeterred by the danger. On the night of May 17th, Landsberg camped near the mountain, sensing something big was coming. As dawn broke on May 18th, the volcano seemed eerily calm. It had been quiet for days, leading some to think the worst was over. Landsberg, however, wasn't one to leave until he got his shot. Literally. He parked his car near Sheep Canyon, just outside the restricted zone, and prepared for another day of capturing the mountain's moody personality. At 8:32 a.m., Mother Nature decided to prove everyone wrong. A 5.1 magnitude earthquake rocked the area, triggering the largest landslide in recorded history. The northern face of the mountain collapsed, and with it came a lateral blast, a pyroclastic flow hurtling down at 400 miles per hour. To witnesses miles away, it looked like the apocalypse had clocked in early. For Landsberg, positioned in the path of destruction, it was a moment of unimaginable realization. Escape wasn't an option, but Landsberg wasn't about to let the story die with him. As the ash cloud surged closer, he kept his camera snapping, capturing the eruption frame by terrifying frame. When the situation became undeniably hopeless, he sprang into action, not to save himself, but to save his work. He rewound the film, packed it into a protective canister, placed it in his backpack, and used his body to shield it. It was a gamble against nature's fury. The pyroclastic flow, with temperatures soaring to 800 degrees, engulfed Landsberg and his car. The heat and ash took his life instantly, but his foresight and dedication left behind a legacy. In the chaotic aftermath, rescuers focused on finding survivors amid a surreal landscape of ash, mudflows, and debris. Landsberg's body wasn't discovered until June 4th, buried beneath layers of volcanic ash. His car, crushed and scorched, held a remarkable treasure, the backpack he had so carefully protected. Inside, his film was intact. When developed, the photographs revealed a haunting sequence of events, the ash cloud growing larger and darker, advancing with relentless power. These images, later published in National Geographic, provided invaluable insights into the eruption's progression and became a testament to the volcano's destructive force. Robert Landsberg's final act wasn't just one of heroism, it was a moment of extraordinary presence of mind. He didn't just document history, he preserved it, even as the disaster claimed him. His photographs serve as a chilling reminder of the raw power of nature and the lengths one person went to ensure the story would be told. In the end, Landsberg captured not just the eruption, but his own indelible place in history. Mount Everest, the ultimate test of human endurance, has claimed many lives, but few stories are as haunting as that of Hannelore Schmatz. A passionate and skilled mountaineer, she made history as the 4th woman to reach the summit of Everest, but she also became the first woman and the first German citizen to die on its unforgiving slopes. Born in Germany in 1940, Hannelore grew up with an adventurous spirit. She shared her love for the mountains with her husband, Gerhard Schmatz, an experienced climber. Together, they embarked on daring expeditions around the world, conquering peaks in the Alps, the Andes, and the Himalayas. But Everest remained the ultimate prize, a goal that, in 1979, they set out to achieve. At 29,032 feet, 8,849 meters, Everest is a formidable challenge for even the most experienced climbers. The journey to the summit requires navigating the infamous death zone, an altitude above 26,000 feet, 8,000 meters, where oxygen levels are dangerously low and the human body begins to shut down. With a fatality rate of around 6.5%, the mountain is ruthless to those who underestimate its dangers. In the fall of 1979, Hannelore and Gerhard joined an expedition team of 13 members, 8 climbers and 5 Sherpas. Among them were Swiss-American Ray Genet, New Zealander Nick Banks, and Germans Tilman Fischbach and Hermann Worth. The group faced extreme weather conditions, including a prolonged blizzard, but they remained determined to push forward. The expedition split into 2 teams at Camp 3. On October 1st, Gerhard led the first group to the summit, making history as the oldest person to reach the top at age 50. His team successfully descended to Camp 2 the next day. Meanwhile, Hannelore's group set off at dawn on October 2nd, despite worsening weather. Gerhard, speaking via walkie-talkie, warned her to reconsider, but she pressed on. By early afternoon, she and her teammates reached the peak. It was a moment of triumph, but also the beginning of a catastrophe. The descent turned deadly. Exhaustion and brutal conditions drained Hannelore's strength. Genet ran out of oxygen, and as darkness fell, both climbers were too weak to continue. Against the warnings of their Sherpa guides, they made the fateful decision to bivouac at 28,000 feet, 8,500 meters. It was a lethal mistake. As temperatures plummeted and winds howled, the freezing night took its toll. By morning, Genet had succumbed to hypothermia. Sungdair Sherpa, who had stayed behind with them, tried to help Hannelore down, but she was barely conscious, just 330 feet, 100 meters above Camp 4. She collapsed. Her last words were a desperate whisper, "Water, water," before she succumbed to the mountain's grip. She was only 39. Sungdair, frostbitten and barely alive, managed to reach a rescue team. He survived but lost most of his fingers and toes. For years, Hannelore's body remained a chilling landmark on Everest's southern route, frozen in a seated position against her backpack. Her eyes wide open, her hair whipped by the wind, she became a spectral presence on the mountain. Climbers described her as a sinister guard, a stark reminder of Everest's unforgiving nature. While Genet's body was eventually buried by snowfall, Hannelore's remained visible until 1984, when the mountain finally claimed her. Strong winds swept her remains over the Kangshung face, and she was lost from sight forever. Even today, over 200 bodies remain on Everest, silent witnesses to the mountain's relentless power. Gerhard, who survived the expedition, later reflected on his wife's fate. The team came home, but I alone, without my beloved Hannelore. Her legacy endures, a testament to both the triumphs and the tragedies that come with chasing the heights of the world's deadliest peak. It was September 14th, 2004, deep in the wilderness of Yukon, Canada. A float plane glided over the glassy waters of Reed Lakes, tucked into the southern slopes of the Selwyn Mountains, before gently touching down. This was a place few humans ever saw 175 miles north of Whitehorse, with the nearest settlement, Stewart Crossing, 15 miles away. Only the most seasoned hunters or wildlife experts dared venture here. On board was 49-year-old Bart Schleier, a man whose life was defined by the wild. He had come for a 2-week solo expedition, fully prepared, or so everyone thought. Bart wasn't an ordinary outdoorsman. He was a wildlife biologist, hunter, and survival expert who had spent decades navigating some of the world's most unforgiving landscapes. Born in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1955, he grew up under the guidance of his father, Dr. Otis Schleier, a physician and hunter. At just 10 years old, Bart joined his father on a safari in Mozambique, a trip that would ignite a lifelong obsession with the animal kingdom. From drawing wildlife in meticulous detail to studying their behavior, Bart's fascination was unmatched. By 1979, he had earned a master's degree in wildlife biology from Montana State University. Professors remembered him as someone who seemed to understand animals in a way few ever could. He worked on the grizzly bear recovery project in Yellowstone, capturing and tagging bears with radio collars. Later, he traveled to the Russian wilderness to study endangered Siberian tigers, where he lived with a partner, Tanya Perova, and their son, Artyom. Bart thrived in the wild, building his own bows and arrows, hunting and surviving for months in isolation where others would falter. When he arrived at Reed Lakes, he carried with him 3 large containers of food, a tent, clothing, and an inflatable boat. He was ready for anything, or so it seemed. But when the float plane returned 2 weeks later, Bart was gone. His supplies remained untouched, but there was no sign of him. On September 30th, he was reported missing. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a search. They found traces of food and his inflatable boat half a mile from camp, hinting that he might have tried to walk toward the highway. But the wilderness had other plans. Worsening weather forced the search to halt, yet Bart's close friend Dib Williams refused to believe the story ended there. Together with pilot Wayne Curry, they returned, scanning the frozen, silent expanse. What they found sent a shiver down their spines. Bart's tent had collapsed, everything inside untouched, his backpack, knife, radio, even the bear he had brought along. This was a man who never abandoned his gear. The next day, more clues emerged. His bow leaning against a spruce, a handmade quiver, a dry bag. It appeared Bart had been calling for moose, perhaps one last time. Then came the haunting discovery, a camouflage face mask, smeared with blood and hair. The RCMP were called back. The new search revealed animal tracks, scattered clothing, a cap, a camera, and part of a human skull. Dental records confirmed Bart Schleier was dead. The evidence suggested a grizzly attack, drawing uncomfortable comparisons to Timothy Treadwell in Alaska. But friends and fellow experts questioned it. Bart was one of the most skilled wilderness experts alive. Could a bear, or even wolves, really sneak up on him? His clothing showed almost no damage, his skull bore no bite or claw marks, and his food remained untouched, an oddity in any predator attack. Some whispered of a sudden medical emergency. Others quietly speculated about foul play, perhaps linked to his time in Russia. No one knows for certain. What is clear is that in September 2004, the wild claimed one of its most capable and fearless explorers, Bart Schleier, a man who had stared into the eyes of Siberian tigers and grizzlies alike, met a fate that even he could not survive. It was October 19, 1968, when a peaceful day in Yosemite National Park turned grim. A group of hikers stumbled upon a horrifying sight near the base of Nevada Fall. 200 feet downstream from the roaring 594-foot drop lay the lifeless body of 24-year-old Evelyn Consuela Roseman from San Francisco. She had gone hiking alone 3 days earlier and never came back. Evelyn was known to be fiercely independent. She worked as a masseuse in Yosemite during the tourist season and loved exploring nature by herself. That October day had typical conditions, cool weather and low river flow, nothing that would suggest danger. So when she vanished, the theory that she'd been swept away by strong currents didn't make much sense. But the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's death weren't just tragic, they were deeply disturbing. Her corduroy pants were ripped and pulled down to her ankles. Her sweater had been pulled over her head, and another black sweater was found nearby. Oddly, she wasn't wearing any undergarments. Stranger still, her purse, containing all her belongings, was found sitting untouched on a footbridge above the waterfall, far from where her body was found. And her body wasn't where it should have been either. If she had fallen, investigators expected to find her directly below the waterfall. Instead, she was 200 feet downstream. This alone raised red flags. The idea that she jumped or even slipped was ruled out pretty quickly. Even if she had, the impact point just didn't line up. Then came the autopsy, which only deepened the mystery. Evelyn had died from a massive head injury consistent with a fall from a great height. Shockingly, pieces of her brain tissue were found 50 feet away, closer to the waterfall's center. Every single bone in her body was broken, which matched the force of the fall, but oddly, her skin was mostly intact. In falls, this severe torn skin and shredded clothing are common. Not here. Even worse, signs of post-mortem sexual assault were discovered, later confirmed in a case review. At that point, it was clear Evelyn hadn't simply fallen. Someone had caused her death, either by pushing her or by moving her body afterward. Investigators even considered the unsettling idea that someone had somehow launched her. The theory that an animal dragged her didn't hold up. No bite marks, claw injuries, or animal tracks were found. Yet, despite the suspicious evidence, Evelyn's case was handled unusually quietly. Mariposa County officials suggested a coroner's jury might be called, but nothing more was ever said. The FBI got involved, but their files remained sealed. Technically, the case is still open, leaving only scattered media reports and books to piece together the truth. In 2019, during a paranormal conference, one speaker suggested Evelyn's death might have involved a cryptid, but a woman in the audience cut in, pointing to the obvious. There was plenty of evidence of human violence, no monsters required. One book added more grim details, including that Evelyn had worked as a topless waitress and masseuse, details that, sadly, might have shaped how her case was viewed at the time. In the end, the big questions remain: why move her body? Why risk being seen? And most importantly, who did it? Over 50 years later, Evelyn's death still casts a shadow over Yosemite. Someone caused it, and whoever they were never caught. In the summer of 2019, Lucas Fowler and Shinna Dees set off on what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. The couple, young and in love, were exploring the wild beauty of Canada together, armed with a sense of wonder, a restored van, and a deep passion for travel. But their journey, meant to celebrate life and connection, ended in tragedy. Lucas, 23, was from Sydney, Australia. He was the fourth child in a tight-knit family and had grown up outdoors, riding dirt bikes, camping, and soaking in every bit of adventure he could find. After backpacking around the world for 2 years, he met Chinna in Croatia. She was 24, from North Carolina, and just as adventurous as Lucas. The youngest in her family, Chinna was known for her kindness and curiosity. They bonded quickly over their shared love for life, exploration, and each other. After spending Christmas together in the U.S., Lucas returned to Canada, where he worked on a remote ranch. From there, they planned a 10-day road trip through British Columbia in Lucas's pride and joy, a restored 1986 blue Chevrolet van. They were chasing beauty, serenity, and freedom. On July 14th, they ran into some car trouble. Their van broke down along the Alaska Highway, about 20 kilometers south of Liard Hot Springs, a remote but scenic area in northern British Columbia. Despite the setback, they didn't let it ruin the moment. Passers-by later recalled seeing the couple smiling, sharing a picnic, and appearing relaxed as they worked on the van. They seemed carefree, in love, and totally in their element. But the next day, July 15th, everything changed. A highway worker named Trevor Pierre discovered their lifeless bodies in a ditch near the van. They were found about 5 meters apart, both with visible gunshot wounds. The back doors of their van were wide open and the windows had been smashed. It was immediately clear this was no accident. It was a brutal, cold-blooded double murder. Authorities struggled for 3 days to identify the victims because of the severity of their injuries. When their names were finally released, shockwaves rippled across Canada and around the world. Lucas's parents flew to Canada, heartbroken. His father, Stephen Fowler, a senior detective in New South Wales, was torn between his professional understanding of violent crime and the unbearable pain of losing his son. Chinna's family in North Carolina was devastated too, remembering her as joyful, kind, and full of light. As investigators dug deeper, the story took a chilling turn. Just 4 days after Lucas and Chinna were killed, the body of Leonard Dyke, a 64-year-old university lecturer, was discovered 470 kilometers away. His truck had been set on fire. The suspects? 2 teenagers, Con McLeod, 18, and Briar Schmigelski, 19, from Port Alberni, British Columbia. They had initially been reported missing but were quickly linked to all 3 murders. A massive manhunt followed, stretching across 3 provinces and capturing international media attention. The teens stole Dyke's car and drove it more than 3,000 kilometers east to Gillam, Manitoba. On August 7th, after weeks of searching, police found their bodies in the woods. Both had died by suicide. For Lucas and Chinna's families, the discovery offered closure, but no comfort. The randomness of the crime only made it more horrific. 2 vibrant young lives, full of promise, had been stolen without reason. At their funerals, Lucas and Chinna were remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived, boldly, lovingly, and together. Footage from a gas station days before their murder shows them smiling, embracing, and cleaning their van side by side. It's a heartbreaking yet beautiful final image of two souls doing what they loved, together. In April 2002, Carolyn Stuttle, a kind-hearted and ambitious 19-year-old from York, England, was nearing the end of her gap-year adventure in Australia. Traveling with her close friend, Sarah Holliday, Caroline had spent months exploring the country's iconic landmarks. Their journey was almost complete, with Bundaberg, a quiet town in Queensland, being one of their final stops before heading home. But Caroline would never return to her family. Like countless young travelers, she had worked hard to save for her trip, taking shifts at Pizza Hut and making detailed plans for the adventure of a lifetime before starting her studies in criminal psychology. She dreamed of helping others, eager to begin the next chapter of her life. On April 10, 2002, Caroline stepped out alone to make a phone call to her boyfriend in England. As she walked back to her caravan park, her path crossed with Ian Privet, a 32-year-old drifter and drug addict. Desperate for money to fuel his addiction, Privet's desperation turned violent. He spotted Caroline and attempted to snatch her handbag. She fought back, refusing to let go. Determined to get what he wanted, Privet's aggression escalated. He forced Caroline over the railing of the bridge they were standing on, sending her plummeting 32 feet to the ground below. The fall left her fatally injured, her life stolen for the trivial sum of £180, a meaningless amount in exchange for a bright future extinguished too soon. When police arrived, Caroline's body lay beneath the bridge, her belongings gone. News of her murder quickly spread, shattering her family's world and stunning the community back in York. Investigators pursued leads, but Privet remained unidentified and the case grew cold. Months later, an unexpected breakthrough emerged. While serving time for an unrelated crime, Privet reportedly confessed to Caroline's murder. His chilling admission gained credibility when authorities discovered a handwritten message scrawled on a bench near his hostel. "I threw the girl off the bridge. I am sorry." The confession gave police the break they needed, leading to Privet's arrest and trial in 2004. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the jury found him guilty. Judge Peter Doney sentenced him to life in prison, condemning his actions and the tragic loss of an innocent young woman. For Caroline's grieving family, the verdict provided some relief, but no true closure. Knowing Privet was behind bars could not erase the pain of her absence. Determined to honor her memory, Caroline's family founded Caroline's Rainbow Foundation, a charity dedicated to educating young travelers about safety and awareness while abroad. Her brother, Richard Stuttle, has continued the foundation's mission, ensuring Caroline's adventurous spirit and kindness live on through their work. However, in 2020, Privet was released from prison, reopening the wounds her loss had inflicted. Richard spoke out about the lifelong impact of Caroline's murder, stating that while Privet's life sentence ended, theirs would last forever. June 14, 2016, was supposed to be a magical evening at Disney World's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa in Orlando, Florida. The Graves family, visiting from Elkhorn, Nebraska, was soaking up the Disney magic. Among them was their adventurous 2-year-old son, Lane Thomas Graves, who was enjoying the warm night by the Seven Seas Lagoon with his parents, Matt and Melissa, and his big sister Ella. That night, Disney was screening Zootopia under the stars, and little Lane was having the time of his life, splashing in the shallow water near the shore. It was around 8:30 p.m., a time when the Florida alligators are most active. As Lane bent down near the water's edge, an alligator, estimated to be around 7 to 8 feet long, emerged from the lagoon. In a flash, the reptile lunged and grabbed Lane, mistaking him for an easy meal. Matt, standing just a few feet away, heard the splash and immediately sprang into action. Without hesitation, he rushed into the water, trying to pry his son from the gator's powerful jaws. He fought desperately, but the alligator was too strong, dragging Lane into deeper water and out of reach. It was every parent's worst nightmare unfolding in an instant. A massive search operation kicked off immediately. Disney staff, law enforcement, and dive teams worked through the night. After 17 grueling hours, Lane's body was found 6 feet underwater, about 15 yards from where he was taken. The medical examiner later confirmed his cause of death as drowning and traumatic injuries caused by the alligator. In the wake of the tragedy, Disney wasted no time making changes. They removed nearly 100 alligators from their properties, installed barriers around the lagoon, and put up new warning signs explicitly mentioning alligators. They also built a lighthouse memorial near the lagoon in honor of Lane. Meanwhile, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission investigated the incident and deemed it a predatory attack, noting that it occurred at dusk, prime hunting time for alligators. Although no swimming signs had been posted, they didn't warn guests about alligators. Shockingly, reports later revealed that some guests had even alerted Disney staff about a gator in the area before the attack, but no action was taken. Despite their unimaginable grief, Matt and Melissa Graves chose not to take legal action against Disney. Instead, they channeled their loss into something meaningful, establishing the Lane Thomas Foundation. The foundation helps families navigating pediatric organ transplants, a cause close to their hearts. On July 3, 2018, Aaron Gibbons set out on what should have been a peaceful family trip, a day of tradition, bonding, and quiet survival in the vast Arctic wilderness. But by nightfall, he would become a legend, a father who made the ultimate sacrifice in the face of one of nature's most terrifying predators. Aaron, 31, was no stranger to the wild. Born and raised in Arviat, Nunavut, he belonged to a people who had spent generations coexisting with the brutal forces of nature. Though he worked in a gold mine, his heart remained tied to his community's hunting traditions. On that fateful day, he took his children to Sentry Island, a remote Arctic outpost with windswept beaches and an abundance of wildlife. It was a chance to teach them the ways of their ancestors, to show them how to gather Arctic tern eggs, to respect the land, and to embrace the unforgiving beauty of the North. But nature doesn't follow a script. As the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the tundra, Aaron caught sight of something massive, something pale, something moving, a polar bear. At first, it was just a shape in the distance, blending into the barren landscape. Then it moved again, and this time it was coming straight for them. Everything changed in an instant. Aaron's instincts kicked in before fear could take hold. The bear was closing in, fast. He shouted for his children to run, his voice sharp, urgent, leaving no room for hesitation. They sprinted for the boat, scrambling over the rough terrain, their hearts hammering. But Aaron, he didn't run. He couldn't. He planted his feet and turned to face the beast. He knew what had to be done. This was no ordinary bear encounter. There was no time to scare it away, no time to grab a weapon. The predator was already locked onto its prey, and Aaron was the only thing standing between it and his children. The attack was brutal, a desperate struggle of flesh against claws, of a father's unbreakable love against one of nature's deadliest hunters. His children, safe aboard the boat, could only watch in horror as their father fought for his life, his final moments filled with sheer, unrelenting courage. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Aaron had given everything. The bear was eventually killed, but the damage had been done. The man who had once stood as a protector of his people, a skilled hunter, a devoted father, was gone. His body, torn and bloodied, was a devastating reminder of the dangers lurking in the Arctic wilderness. In Arviat, grief turned into outrage. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was part of a growing problem. Polar bears were getting bolder, venturing closer to human settlements. Some blamed climate change for forcing the bears further inland, while others pointed to Churchill, Manitoba, a nearby town famous for polar bear tourism. Had these guided tours, where people walked among the bears, desensitized the animals to humans? Had they lost their fear, turning them into silent stalkers of the North? Aaron's uncle, Gordy Kidpick, a respected elder, spoke out. He warned that if changes weren't made, more families would suffer, more lives would be lost. But even amid the anger, one truth remained undeniable. Aaron Gibbons had died a hero. His bravery was later recognized with Canada's Star of Courage, an honor for those who display extraordinary valor in the face of death, but no medal could bring him back. What he left behind was more than just sorrow. It was a legacy of selflessness, of love, of a father's instinct to protect at all costs, and it was a warning, a chilling reminder that in the battle between man and nature, nature never fights fair. Desiree Gibbon, a thrill-seeking 26-year-old from Queens, New York, set off on an adventure to Jamaica in November 2017. Staying at her grandmother's hotel in Montego Bay, she was more than just a tourist. She was a model, an aspiring filmmaker, and a globetrotter with big dreams of heading to film school in Europe. Montego Bay's lively streets and gorgeous beaches provided the perfect break from the chaotic pace of New York, offering both comfort and opportunity. Determined to make the most of her time there, she even sought a bartending job to help fund her future while uncovering the island's hidden gems. Her enthusiasm and open-minded nature led her to cross paths with all kinds of people, some friendly, others possibly dangerous. Despite whispers of certain areas, like Anchovy, being less than safe, Desiree either didn't notice or chose to ignore the warnings. Then, on November 26, 2017, she walked out of her grandmother's hotel to meet someone and vanished. The next morning, the worst possible news arrived. Locals in Anchovy discovered her body hidden in the bushes. Her throat had been slashed, her face bruised, a brutal and senseless attack that sent shockwaves through the community. Jamaica, already grappling with trust in its law enforcement, now faced another tragedy that seemed to slip through the cracks of justice. Desiree's devastated family was left struggling with the unthinkable. How could this happen in a place she had felt so at home? Her mother, Andrea, couldn't shake the horrifying thought that the killer was someone her daughter had trusted. Desiree had always been cautious, aware of the risks of traveling alone, yet it seemed her kindness had been betrayed in the worst possible way. The investigation was agonizingly slow. Overwhelmed authorities found little evidence, no immediate leads, and no suspects. As frustration mounted, rumors swirled. Was it a crime of passion, a robbery gone wrong, or something even more sinister lurking beneath the surface of paradise? Andrea, desperate for closure, was convinced her daughter had been deliberately lured away. The missing purse, money, and ID only reinforced the belief that it wasn't random. Weeks turned into months, and the case grew colder. Authorities released minimal details, citing an ongoing investigation, but progress was painfully slow. Desiree's family, stuck in an agonizing limbo, kept demanding answers, but their pleas seemed to fade into silence. The harsh reality set in. In a place where crime often met indifference and resources were stretched thin, finding justice felt impossible. Desiree's story became a chilling, cautionary tale, a reminder that even in the most beautiful places, danger can lurk beneath the surface. Her dreams of film school and making a name for herself were stolen in an instant, leaving behind only heartbreak and the unanswered question of who took her life. It was October 8, 2024, in the breathtaking wilderness of Yosemite National Park, California, where Harry Partington, a 22-year-old adventurer from Perth, Australia, set out for another exciting journey. A seasoned explorer with a passion for nature, Harry was the kind of guy who filled his social media with stunning landscapes and thrilling hiking tales. This trip to Yosemite was supposed to be just another notch in his adventure belt, a memory to cherish. Instead, it turned into an unspeakable tragedy. Harry was tackling the 4-mile trail, a 4.8-mile trek that climbs over 3,000 feet, boasting jaw-dropping views of El Capitan, Yosemite Falls, and Half Dome. While it's a bucket list-worthy hike, it's also no joke. Steep, rugged, and demanding every ounce of focus and stamina. That day, around 2:30 p.m., as Harry neared Union Point at about 6,300 feet above sea level, the weather took a nasty turn. Strong winds and light rain swept through the area, turning the trail into a hazard zone. Then, in a split second, the unimaginable happened. A massive tree, uprooted by the powerful gusts, came crashing down onto the trail. Harry, caught in its path, was tragically struck and fatally injured. Nearby, a German hiker was also hit. She survived, but her injuries were severe enough to require an emergency airlift to the hospital. Park rangers, paramedics, firefighters, and search and rescue teams sprang into action, helicopters slicing through the sky to manage the crisis. For visitors, the sight of whirring choppers and a swarm of emergency personnel was both shocking and heartbreaking. Kelly Kennedy Bentley, a tourist waiting for her family at the trailhead, described the tension in the air, feeling relieved that her loved ones were safe but deeply shaken by the nearby tragedy. The 4-mile trail was temporarily closed, and hikers were kept at a distance as responders worked. Witnesses recalled the chaos of the rescue effort, with at least 30 emergency personnel rushing to the scene. Sadly, Harry's tragic accident wasn't the only recent loss in Yosemite. Just weeks earlier, the body of Kirk Thomas Olson, a former park ranger, had been found near the Ostrander Lake Trail after being missing for 3 weeks. Incidents like these serve as stark reminders of how unpredictable the wilderness can be. Yosemite, despite its majestic beauty, has claimed over 1,300 lives since its establishment in 1890, with many hikers falling victim to unforeseen dangers. The Mariposa County Sheriff's Office announced plans for an autopsy to confirm Harry's exact cause of death, though the falling tree was the undisputed culprit. While falling trees, dubbed hazard trees by experts, are rare causes of fatalities, they remain an ever-present risk in forested areas, especially during storms. For Harry's family and friends, his sudden passing was devastating. Tributes poured in across social media, with loved ones remembering his adventurous spirit and boundless love for travel. Victor Mary, a close friend, reflected that Harry had traveled further than most people ever dream, and though his journey had come to an abrupt end, his legacy would live on in the hearts of everyone he touched. Harry's story is a sobering reminder that no matter how experienced or prepared we are, nature has its own unpredictable ways. His passing is a heartbreaking loss, but his passion for adventure will forever inspire those who dare to explore the world's most beautiful, yet unforgiving, landscapes. The summer of 2019 was meant to be an unforgettable adventure for Lucas Fowler and Chinna Dees, a journey through Canada's vast and untamed wilderness, celebrating their love and insatiable thirst for exploration. Instead, it became a nightmare, a chilling and senseless tragedy that would haunt their families forever. Lucas, a 23-year-old from Sydney, Australia, had been raised with a love for the outdoors. His childhood was filled with dirt bike rides and camping trips, and by his early 20s his adventurous spirit had already carried him across the globe. It was during these travels that he met Chinna, a 24-year-old from North Carolina. Kind-hearted, free-spirited, and endlessly optimistic, Chinna was the perfect counterpart to Lucas. Their bond was instant, their love undeniable. After spending Christmas together in the U.S., Lucas returned to his job on a remote Canadian ranch, preparing for their long-anticipated road trip. Their plan was simple: 10 days of driving through British Columbia's breathtaking landscapes in Lucas's beloved 1986 blue Chevrolet van, a symbol of their shared love for the open road. But the journey took a dark turn on July 14th. Their van broke down along the remote Alaska Highway, roughly 20 kilometers south of Liard Hot Springs. Stranded but undeterred, they laughed, embraced, and even enjoyed a roadside picnic as they tried to get their van running again. Passing motorists recalled the young couple smiling and full of life, blissfully unaware of the horror lurking in the shadows. The following morning, the dream was shattered. A highway worker, Trevor Pierre, made a gruesome discovery. Lucas and Chinna's bodies lay just meters from their van, lifeless and riddled with gunshot wounds. The scene was one of sheer brutality. The back doors of the van swung open, its windows shattered, and the couple's bodies positioned eerily, as if frozen in time. It was clear this was no accident. This was a cold-blooded execution. For 3 agonizing days, authorities struggled to identify the victims, their faces marred by the violence of their final moments. When the names Lucas Fowler and Chinna Dees were finally revealed, the news sent shockwaves through their families and across the world. Lucas's father, Stephen Fowler, a seasoned detective in New South Wales, was thrust into an unbearable reality. His own son was the victim of a heinous crime. Chinna's family in North Carolina faced their own torment, grappling with the loss of their beloved daughter and sister. Their grief was compounded by an unsettling question. Who would do this, and why? The answers would come, horrifying and senseless. Then, a shocking twist. 2 teenagers, Cam McLeod, 18, and Briar Schmigelski, 19, initially reported as missing persons, were identified as the prime suspects. The revelations turned the case into a nationwide manhunt. Over the next 15 days, police tracked the fugitives across 3 provinces. The young men left a trail of destruction, evading capture and sending fear rippling across Canada. Their final destination? The dense wilderness near Gillam, Manitoba. On August 7th, after weeks of searching, authorities found their bodies deep in the brush. They had taken their own lives, ending the pursuit but offering no justice, no real answers. For the families of Lucas and Chinna, the discovery brought a bitter form of closure. The monsters responsible for their children's deaths were gone, but the senselessness remained. In the days following the tragedy, a single piece of CCTV footage surfaced, offering a haunting glimpse into the couple's final days. It showed Lucas and Chinna at a gas station, laughing, holding each other and wiping down their van's windows. A snapshot of love, of innocence, of a life they were supposed to have. A life stolen by 2 aimless killers with no clear motive, no reason beyond destruction. At their funerals, Lucas and Chinna were remembered not for the tragedy that befell them, but for the love they carried, the joy they spread, and the adventure that defined their short but beautiful lives. On a fateful Saturday evening in August, the unforgiving wilderness of Alaska's Denali National Park became the site of a devastating tragedy. A sightseeing plane carrying 4 Polish tourists and their pilot crashed into the rugged terrain of Thunder Mountain, leaving all 5 aboard presumed dead. The ill-fated flight, operated by K2 Aviation, was a 1-hour tour over the breathtaking Kahiltna Glacier, a key starting point for climbers aiming to ascend Denali, the tallest peak in North America. The de Havilland Beaver plane, piloted by Craig Layson of Saline, Michigan, took off around 5 p.m., but never completed its journey. At approximately 6 p.m., the aircraft went down near the summit of Thunder Mountain, an imposing ridge rising 10,900 feet above the glacier. In the moments after the crash, Layson managed to send a distress call via satellite phone, reporting injuries among his passengers. However, the connection dropped before he could relay further details, leaving rescuers scrambling to piece together the situation. The plane was equipped with survival gear, including sleeping bags, a stove, and food, sparking a glimmer of hope that survivors might endure until help arrived. Nature, however, conspired against the rescue efforts. Low clouds and relentless rain shrouded the crash site, making it nearly impossible for search crews to locate the wreckage. For over a day, dense weather conditions thwarted aerial reconnaissance, prolonging the agony of those waiting for news. Finally, on Monday, the skies cleared just enough for a helicopter to reach the crash site, perched precariously on the steep slopes of Thunder Mountain. A park ranger was lowered by short-haul line onto the wreckage, where he began the grim task of searching for survivors. Inside the plane, now partially buried under snow, he discovered the bodies of 4 individuals. The snow surrounding the wreckage was undisturbed, with no footprints or signs that anyone had exited the aircraft. The 5th individual, presumed to be the pilot, remains missing, though authorities believe he too perished in the crash. The stark terrain of Thunder Mountain posed immense challenges to both the flight and subsequent rescue operation. Though labeled a mountain, the area is better described as a treacherous mile-long ridge, a mix of vertical rock faces, ice, and deep snowfields. The National Park Service characterized the conditions as some of the harshest imaginable, underscoring the difficulty of surviving such a crash. This tragic event marks a defining chapter in the history of Denali National Park, a place renowned for its beauty but also its peril. The Polish tourists, who had embarked on their flight to marvel at the untouched majesty of the glacier, instead met their end in one of its most remote and inhospitable corners. For K2 Aviation, a company long trusted to provide safe access to Denali's wonders, the crash is a heartbreaking reminder of the risks inherent in flying over such challenging terrain. While the company has not experienced frequent accidents, this incident underscores the unpredictable and often merciless nature of Alaska's wilderness. The tragedy of Thunder Mountain will not soon be forgotten. It serves as a permanent reminder of the delicate balance between humanity's desire to explore and the relentless power of nature, a force that does not yield to even the most prepared adventurers. The memories of those lost will remain etched in the hearts of their loved ones, and all who know the call of the wild can come with an unfathomable cost. It was a calm, starry January night in 2022 at Arizona's Lost Dutchman State Park, a picturesque gem nestled about 40 miles east of Phoenix. Known for its rugged Superstition Mountains, the park is a magnet for thrill-seekers, with the Flatiron Summit as its crown jewel. This daunting peak offers breathtaking views and equally breathtaking dangers. Among the adventurers drawn to its challenging paths that night was 21-year-old Richard Jacobson, a Mesa local and an avid lover of the great outdoors. Richard had set out on a camping trip with a friend, aiming to conquer the Flatiron Summit. Their hike was no walk in the park. Steep trails, loose rocks, and narrow edges made it as nerve-wracking as it was rewarding. But when they reached the summit, their exhaustion melted away. From their lofty perch, city lights twinkled below, a glittering contrast to the serene wilderness surrounding them. They pitched their tent, soaking in the tranquil beauty and crisp mountain air. As the clock struck midnight, the peaceful scene turned ominous. Around 12:45 a.m., Richard decided to capture the city's sparkle against the shadowy landscape. Armed with his phone and flashlight, he ventured near the cliff's edge while his friend stayed back at camp. The summit was dark and treacherous, but Richard pressed on, eager to frame the perfect shot. In the dim glow of his flashlight, Richard miscalculated his footing. One slip was all it took. He lost his balance on the uneven terrain and fell an estimated 700 feet into the darkness below. His friend, startled by the sound of the fall, immediately called 911. The rescue effort began, but navigating the dangerous summit at night proved as perilous for the rescuers as it had been for Richard. Hours later, as dawn approached, search teams located Richard's body on a trail far below. The Pinal County Sheriff's Office and Arizona Department of Public Safety confirmed the heartbreaking news. Richard had died instantly. There was no sign of foul play or substance use, just a tragic accident that forever altered the lives of those who knew and loved him. Richard was remembered as a kind, adventurous soul who relished the beauty of nature. Andrew Thomas, who had shared a mission trip with him in 2020, described Richard as someone who could connect with anyone. Though devastated, his family and friends took solace in knowing he was doing something he loved. His father, Richard Jacobson Sr., posted a heartfelt message online, inviting others to celebrate his son's life and cherish his memory. Flatiron Summit is known for testing even seasoned hikers. Accessible via the Siphon Draw Trail, its steep rocky paths require unwavering focus. Online reviews frequently warn of the dangers, urging hikers to tread carefully, especially near the summit. Sadly, Richard's fall was not an isolated incident. A 2018 study revealed that between 2011 and 2017, 259 people worldwide died attempting selfies, with falls being a leading cause. Experts continue to stress the importance of safety in high-risk environments. Brandon Torres of Grand Canyon Emergency Services often cautions against mixing exploration with risky stunts. Sometimes, he notes, a fake fall for a photo becomes tragically real. Richard's story is a poignant reminder of nature's duality, awe-inspiring beauty and unforgiving peril. His love for the outdoors, coupled with a fleeting distraction, led to a devastating loss that echoes the importance of prioritizing safety in the pursuit of adventure. In the unforgiving heights of Mount Everest, where the air is thin and the cold is merciless, Frances Arsentiev's final moments unfolded in a way both haunting and unforgettable. Her story is one of unrelenting ambition, breathtaking bravery, and a tragic end that immortalized her as Everest's Sleeping Beauty. Born on January 18, 1958 in Honolulu, Hawaii, Frances DiStefano Arsentiev was destined for adventure. From an early age, she possessed a fierce determination, an insatiable thirst for challenge. Her ultimate goal, to stand atop the world's highest peak without supplemental oxygen. In 1998, she set out to make history as the first American woman to achieve this feat. But Everest is merciless. The climb demands everything from those who dare to challenge it. Oxygen levels plummet, temperatures drop to lethal lows, and even the strongest bodies begin to shut down. For Frances, the cost of her dream was steep. Despite overwhelming exhaustion, the brutal separation from her husband, and the sheer mental and physical toll of the climb, she pressed on. Against all odds, she reached the summit, but the true battle had only just begun. The descent, always more treacherous than the climb, became her undoing. Somewhere along the way, she became disoriented. Her body, battered by extreme cold and deprivation, began to fail her. Alone and vulnerable in Everest's infamous death zone, she slipped into the slow, agonizing grip of hypothermia. As her core temperature dropped, she lost cognitive function. The world around her faded into a blur. Two climbers, British mountaineer Ian Woodall and South African Cathy O'Dowd, encountered Frances on their way up. She was still alive, but barely. Her body frozen, her voice weak, helpless against the mountain's brutal conditions. They tried to aid her, but ultimately had to make the impossible decision: save themselves or perish alongside her. The guilt of leaving Frances behind would haunt them forever. For nearly a decade, her body remained on Everest, a silent, snow-covered figure resting against the icy slopes. When climbers passed by, they described her appearance as eerily serene, her face pale, her features untouched by the brutality of the mountain. She looked as though she were merely sleeping, earning her the heartbreaking moniker, the Sleeping Beauty of Everest. But her story did not end there. In 2007, haunted by the memory of the woman they could not save, Ian Woodall and a team returned to the mountain. This time, their mission was not to conquer Everest, but to bring peace to those it had claimed. The operation, known as the Tao of Everest, sought to retrieve Frances' body and give her the dignity in death she had been denied. It was a symbolic act of justice, not just for her, but for others whose remains had become grim landmarks on the mountain. Among them, the infamous Green Boots and David Sharp. Frances' body was finally moved from its exposed position, allowing her to rest beyond the reach of passing climbers. The mission was hailed as a heroic gesture, an effort to honor those who had given everything to Everest. Her story remains one of both triumph and tragedy. She reached the top of the world, but the mountain refused to let her go. Her legacy, however, endures, not just as a cautionary tale of Everest's dangers, but as a testament to the human spirit's relentless pursuit of greatness. The Sleeping Beauty of Everest will never be forgotten. It was April 3rd, 2006, in La Grave, France, a place where the mountains don't just rise, they loom, they judge, they wait. The air was sharp, the snow untouched, the kind of morning that tempts even the most seasoned adventurers to go steeper, push harder. And that's exactly where 48-year-old American extreme skier Doug Coombs was headed. Doug wasn't a weekend skier. He was a pioneer, one of the men who defined extreme skiing itself. Born in Boston, raised on the icy slopes of New England, shaped by Montana State and sharpened in Jackson Hole, Doug lived for the feeling of dancing down slopes so steep they looked vertical. He co-founded Valdez Heli Ski Guides, won 2 World Extreme Skiing Championships, and mentored a generation of skiers. But titles never mattered to him. Freedom did. By the early 2000s, Lagrave had become his sanctuary, raw, ungroomed, untouched, and utterly unforgiving. No ski patrol, no boundaries, just a cable car that dropped you into chaos. That's where Doug felt most alive. That morning, he was with 30-year-old guide-in-training Chad Vanderham. They approached the Couloir de Polichinelle, a 50-55-degree chute where one mistake becomes a freefall. Mid-descent, Chad slipped. One moment of instability and he was gone. Doug didn't think. He moved to help, and that's who he was, but the slope didn't care. Doug slipped too. Both men fell nearly 500 feet. Doug died instantly. Chad survived the impact, but later passed away. The skiing world shattered. Arguments followed. Was Lagrave too dangerous, or was its danger the very point? Doug himself had always chased risk, even getting banned from Jackson Hole for pushing boundaries. But this time, skill wasn't enough. Precision wasn't enough. The mountain chose otherwise. A decade later, friends returned quietly and placed plaques in their memory. Snow buried them, but not the legacy. Doug Coombs was a husband, father, mentor, and icon. A man who shaped a sport. But that day in Lagrave proved one thing. In the mountains, even legends are mortal. It was November 22, 2020, high in the Pyrenees Mountains along the French-Spanish border, when 37-year-old British hiker Esther Dingley set out on what would be her final trek. An experienced solo adventurer, Esther had spent years traveling Europe in a camper van with her longtime partner Dan Colgate, documenting their life together on a travel blog. This time, she was hiking alone. That afternoon, she summited Pic de Sauvegard, a 737-meter peak, and sent Dan a selfie via WhatsApp around 4 p.m. They shared a brief 90-second video call, the last time anyone would hear from her. Esther planned to spend the night at Refuge de Venasque, a small unmanned mountain shelter nearby. Her route, crossing briefly into France before looping back into Spain, was well within her capabilities. Her last message read, "Might dip into France, hoping Refuge Venasque has a winter room. Keep you posted when can. Love you, X." She never sent another message. 3 days later, on November 25th, Dan reported her missing. He had been house-sitting just 100 miles away. Authorities from both France and Spain launched a joint search effort across nearly 700 square miles. Drones, helicopters, and alpine rescue teams combed the rugged terrain, but found no sign of Esther. As December brought worsening snowstorms, the official search was suspended until spring. Dan stayed behind, continuing to search whenever weather allowed. He had mapped her planned route in a detailed 23-page document, a route she had personally confirmed before setting out. Still, there were no answers. By February 2021, Dan voiced growing concerns that Esther may have encountered someone, possibly hunters, but authorities continued to treat the case as a tragic accident. When spring arrived and the snow began to melt, the search resumed. On July 23, 2021, a group of mountain runners made a grim discovery near Port de la Glaire, not far from Esther's intended path, a fragment of a human skull. DNA confirmed it was hers. Then, on August 9th, Dan made the heartbreaking discovery himself. After narrowing his search, he found Esther's body about 400 meters below the summit of Pic de la Glaire. Her backpack, hiking shoes, and phone were nearby, partially concealed by snow and months of exposure. Her yellow tent was never found. Esther's hiking shoes showed signs of heavy wear. Although she had packed Kula microspikes, traction gear for icy terrain, she hadn't been wearing them. An autopsy later confirmed that she likely died instantly after falling roughly 100 feet from a rocky ridge. The injuries pointed to a high-impact fall, possibly caused by slipping on ice made worse by worn soles. Her phone held no further clues beyond that final video call. The spot where she fell was remote and difficult to reach, contributing to the months-long delay in locating her. There were no signs of foul play. Investigators concluded that Esther was following her planned route when she slipped. Despite her experience and careful preparation, the terrain had proven treacherous and unforgiving. In a joint statement, Dan and Esther's mother thanked the search teams and everyone who had supported them during the long months of uncertainty. They shared their sorrow, now knowing for certain that Esther would not be coming home. Esther Dingley had prepared for this journey with thought and care. But in the mountains, even the most seasoned hikers can face dangers beyond their control. Her final adventure was one she embraced fully, but nature, as always, had the final word. In the early morning hours of July 6, 2021, the peaceful town of Ovando, Montana, nestled beside the Blackfoot River, became the scene of a chilling and tragic encounter. 65-year-old Leah Davis Loken, a retired nurse from Chico, California, met an apex predator face-to-face and sadly didn't survive. Leah was no stranger to adventure. She had a deep love for the outdoors and was known among her friends and family as a passionate cyclist. That summer, she set out on a long-distance ride along the Great Divide mountain bike route, a journey she had been planning for months. Her route took her through remote and scenic stretches of the American West, eventually bringing her to the tiny town of Ovando, population fewer than 100. It's known for its rustic charm, but more ominously, it's also on the edge of grizzly bear territory. The nearby Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex is home to nearly 1,000 grizzlies. Leah arrived in Ovando with her sister and a friend, and while they chose to stay at a nearby hotel for the night, Leah opted instead to camp outdoors. She pitched her tent behind the local museum, joined by a Texas couple camping nearby. At around 3 a.m., Leah and the other campers were jolted awake by the sounds of something large moving through the campsite. A grizzly bear, later weighed at 417 pounds, was right outside their tents. Leah could hear it breathing, hear the low, huffing sounds it made as it passed near her head. The group sprang into action, making noise to scare it off, and it worked. The bear vanished into the darkness. Cautious but calm, Leah took steps to reduce any attractants. She removed food items, packaged snacks and dry lentils, from her tent and placed them in a nearby building. She even kept bear spray close at hand before returning to her tent. When offered another chance to retreat to the safety of the hotel, Leah declined. The stars, the peace, this was the wilderness experience she loved, but she missed something. Inside her tent were 2 toiletry bags, ones she had previously used to store dried blueberries. The scent still lingered. Just 10 feet away, her bike held food in its saddlebags, yet another tempting aroma for a hungry bear. Less than an hour later, at about 4 a.m., the grizzly returned. This time, it didn't hesitate. The bear tore into Leah's tent and launched a brutal attack. The Texas couple awoke to the chaos. The man could see the bear pouncing on Leah's tent and desperately sprayed his bear deterrent, shouting to scare it off. But the damage had already been done. Leah was killed almost instantly, her neck broken and spine severed. Wildlife officials later concluded that the bear had likely been food conditioned, a dangerous behavior in which bears associate humans with food after scavenging garbage or campsites. It had likely targeted Leah because of the lingering food scents and her movements inside the tent. 3 days later, the same bear raided a chicken coop near Ovando. Wildlife agents tracked and euthanized it. DNA tests confirmed it was the same bear responsible for Leah's death. The tragedy sparked urgent conversations about outdoor safety in bear country. Investigators stressed the importance of proper food storage, eliminating scented items from tents, and always carrying and knowing how to use bear spray. Most importantly, they urged campers, if a bear approaches, don't just go back to sleep in the same spot. Move, seek shelter in a building or vehicle. Leah Davis Loken's death was heartbreaking and rare, but it serves as a powerful reminder. In bear country, the line between adventure and danger can be razor thin. In May 1996, what should have been a peaceful hiking trip through Virginia's Shenandoah National Park turned into a nightmare, one so chilling that it would haunt the region for decades. Julie Williams, 24, and her partner Laura Loie Winans, 26, set out on an adventure, unaware that something, or someone, was lurking in the wilderness, waiting to turn their dream getaway into a scene of unimaginable horror. The couple, both passionate nature lovers, had come to Shenandoah for a much-needed retreat. Julie was preparing to start a new job in Vermont on June 1st, a fresh chapter in her life. Instead, that date would mark the horrifying end of a frantic search, one that uncovered a crime so brutal it left even seasoned investigators shaken. Julie and Loie entered the park on May 19th, accompanied by their golden retriever, Taj. They followed the White Canyon Trail, but heavy rain forced them to change their route. They registered for additional permits and were last seen on May 24th, when a park ranger gave them a ride. Their final campsite lay near a secluded stream off the Appalachian Trail, just a short distance from the popular Skyland Lodge. It seemed safe, but safety, they would soon learn, was an illusion. For days, no one realized anything was wrong. Then, on May 31st, Julie's father, Thomas Williams, grew uneasy. His daughter should have called about her new job. When she didn't, he reported her missing. Park rangers quickly located Julie and Loie's car near Skyland Lodge, but something was off. The couple was nowhere in sight. Then, a chilling clue, Taj, their dog, was found wandering alone, confused and distressed. Something had happened. Something terrible. The next day, searchers pushed deeper into the wilderness, and that's when they found it. The campsite was eerily silent, but as they moved closer, the truth revealed itself, a scene so gruesome it would stay with them forever. Julie and Loie's bodies lay close together, bound and gagged, their final moments marked by sheer terror. They had suffered. The brutality of the attack spoke of calculated evil, of a predator who had stalked them in the night. Investigators descended on the scene, but the remote location and lack of evidence made the case daunting. They searched for answers, piecing together the couple's last days. A recovered camera showed their joy-filled adventure up until May 24th, the last day they were seen alive. Then, darkness swallowed their story. The investigation led authorities to a man named Daryl David Rice. He had a disturbing history, a documented hatred for women, and had been spotted in Shenandoah around the time of the murders. Restraints were found in his vehicle. He had even made chilling remarks about Julie and Loie's relationship. Prosecutors believed they had their man. But then, in 2003, everything collapsed. DNA from the crime scene didn't match Rice. It didn't match the victims either. The case, once seemingly airtight, fell apart in an instant. The real killer was still out there. For nearly 3 decades, Julie and Loie's families lived in torment, haunted by the unanswered questions. Who had been watching them? Who had crept into their campsite that night, tying them up, silencing their screams and snuffing out their young lives? Then, in 2024, science finally caught up to the truth. A breakthrough in DNA technology led investigators to a new name, Walter Leo Jackson. A convicted serial molester, Jackson had a history of brutal attacks, but he would never face justice for what he did to Julie and Loie. He had died in prison in 2018. The discovery was bittersweet. The families had answers but no justice. The true monster had been hiding in plain sight all along, and the chilling question remains: how many others did he leave behind in the darkness? It was November 16, 2018, when 26-year-old John Allen Chau embarked on a mission that would change his life forever. A devoted American missionary, Chau had trained with All Nations International, a Christian organization, and was deeply passionate about sharing his faith. His dream? To reach the Sentinelese, a fiercely independent tribe living on North Sentinel Island in India's Andaman Islands. They had lived in isolation for thousands of years and were notorious for rejecting any outside contact. But despite the risks, Chau felt it was his calling to introduce them to Christianity. Chau wasn't new to the Andaman Islands. He had visited in 2015 and 2016, learning about the Sentinelese along the way. But this trip was different. This time, he wanted to meet them face to face. The Sentinelese, believed to number around 150, had a well-earned reputation for protecting their isolation, often greeting intruders with a barrage of arrows. Chau, however, was determined. He spent months preparing and hired local fishermen for $325 to take him close to the island, even though they knew it was illegal and extremely dangerous. On November 15th, Chau made his first attempt. Paddling in a kayak while the fishermen stayed behind, he approached the shore and introduced himself, saying that his name was John and that both he and Jesus loved them. The Sentinelese responded by readying their arrows. Hoping to win them over, he offered a fish. It didn't work. The tribe's hostility forced him to retreat. Not one to give up easily, Chau tried again later that day, bringing gifts like a football and more fish. The result? another angry reaction and a hasty retreat. Frustrated but undeterred, he wrote in his journal that he was scared, but still felt called to his mission. He debated leaving, but ultimately decided he couldn't turn back. On November 16th, before making his final attempt, Chow penned a letter to his family, acknowledging the risks and asking for their forgiveness if things went wrong. He made it clear that he didn't blame the tribe or God for whatever might happen. The fisherman, waiting offshore, later reported that as Chow neared the beach, the Sentinelese attacked, shooting him with arrows before dragging his body away. They watched in horror, later recalling that the tribe appeared to bury him on the beach. Authorities confirmed Chow's death, but opted not to retrieve his remains to avoid further conflict. His mission sparked fierce debate. Some saw it as reckless, violating laws designed to protect the Sentinelese from outsiders and potential diseases. Others viewed it as a testament to his unwavering faith. His family forgave the tribe, seeing his mission as an act of sincere devotion. In the end, Chow's story serves as a powerful reminder of the tension between faith and respecting cultural boundaries, a topic that remains deeply polarizing. It was a Saturday afternoon in late March 2024, and Talon and Wyatt Brooks, two adventurous brothers from El Dorado, Northern California, were gearing up for one of their favorite outdoor traditions. At 21 and 18, they were passionate about nature and loved hiking the hills near Georgetown, searching for deer antler sheds, a hobby they enjoyed every spring. Talon, the older brother, worked with his dad painting houses and chopping firewood. He had a love for fishing and playing guitar, while Wyatt, training to be a firefighter, was a baseball enthusiast and a skilled bow hunter. Exploring the wilderness together had strengthened their bond over the years, making them a true brotherly duo of the great outdoors. But what started as a normal, peaceful day in the woods soon took a horrific turn, one they never could have prepared for. As the brothers walked along a remote dirt road, their quiet afternoon was shattered when they spotted a mountain lion creeping toward them. Knowing the risks, they followed all the safety protocols, making themselves look larger, shouting, even throwing a backpack to scare it off. But this lion was unusually aggressive. Instead of retreating, it charged straight at them, setting off a terrifying battle for survival. The lion pounced on Wyatt first, pinning him down and biting his face. He fought back with everything he had, and Talon, without hesitation, jumped in to rescue his brother, hitting the lion to get it off. Wyatt managed to break free and briefly gained the upper hand, but the lion was relentless. It shifted its focus to Talon, locking onto him and gripping his throat. Wyatt, despite his severe injuries, fought desperately to save his brother, but the mountain lion wouldn't let go. Realizing he couldn't overpower the beast alone, Wyatt, covered in blood and barely holding on, made the painful decision to run for help. Wyatt stumbled to their car, his face and neck torn apart, and called 911, his voice trembling with urgency. After making the call, he rushed back to the scene, but Talon and the lion were gone. When authorities arrived, they found Talon's lifeless body nearby. The mountain lion was still there but fled when deputies fired warning shots. Tragically, Talon did not survive. Wildlife officials later tracked down and euthanized the lion, confirming through DNA analysis that it was the same animal responsible for the attack. The Brooks family was left devastated. They had lost Talon, a kind-hearted, nature-loving soul, but they were grateful that Wyatt had survived. He was rushed to the hospital with severe facial and neck injuries, requiring reconstructive surgery. Despite the trauma, Wyatt's resilience never wavered, and he is now focused on healing and continuing his firefighter training. This tragic event has ignited debates about California's wildlife management policies, particularly Proposition 117, a 1990 law that classifies mountain lions as a specially protected species. The brothers' uncle, Malcolm Brooks, has spoken out, arguing that while protecting wildlife is important, human safety must also be considered, especially as urban expansion pushes people and predators into closer contact. Experts emphasize that fatal mountain lion attacks are extremely rare, with this being the first in California since 2004, and the first in El Dorado County since 1994. Typically, mountain lions avoid humans, but this particular 90-pound male acted unpredictably. While researchers continue to study mountain lion behavior, the Brooks family is left mourning the loss of Talon, determined to raise awareness and advocate for better safety measures. Meanwhile, Wyatt, still healing physically and emotionally, is determined to honor his brother's memory. The Brooks family, though deeply grieving, stands proud of Talon and Wyatt's bravery, cherishing the memories of their inseparable bond and love for the great outdoors. The Red Valley of Peru, a mesmerizing expanse of iron-rich soil, shimmering in hues of crimson and emerald, had long drawn adventurers seeking the untouched beauty of the Andean wilderness. But for one traveler, it would become the site of a heartbreaking tragedy, an untimely meeting between raw nature and sheer, unforgiving power. November 2024. Gabriela Diana Basalo, a 32-year-old from Buenos Aires, Argentina, had always embraced life's adventures. A devoted mother to a 10-year-old son, she had recently married Samuel Sierra, the man with whom she planned to explore the world. With a background in cosmology and aesthetics, Gabriela split her time between her passion for makeup artistry and a career in logistics. She was no stranger to the unpredictable, both in work and in life, but nothing could have prepared her for what awaited in the Red Valley. The trip to Peru was a dream come true, a chance to stand at the edge of the world, to breathe the thin, crisp air of the high Andes, to marvel at nature's artistry etched into the mountains. On November 1st, Gabriela and Samuel joined a guided hike through the valley, trekking past landscapes that looked as if they belonged to another planet. But beauty in the wild is never without its dangers. As they descended, the sky began to shift. A heavy silence blanketed the valley. The crisp blue overhead darkened into a swirling storm, rolling in faster than anyone had expected. The once picturesque backdrop transformed into an ominous warning. Dark clouds brooding above the peaks, whispering of an unseen threat. Then it struck. A blinding flash of white-hot energy tore through the sky, splitting the silence with a deafening explosion. A bolt of lightning, precise and merciless, found its target. Gabriela. She never saw it coming. The sheer force of the strike stopped her heart before she could scream. Her body, marked by nature's wrath, was thrown to the ground, smoke rising from her skin. Samuel, hurled aside by the shockwave, scrambled to reach her, his own body aching, his mind refusing to process the horror before him. He called her name. No answer. Gabriela was gone. The tour guide, Ephraim Zamora Galindo, frantically radioed for help. But nature was not finished. Rain slashed down in relentless sheets, the once solid trail morphing into a treacherous, mud-slick descent. Rescuers tried to reach her, but the storm would not allow it. Gabriela's lifeless body remained in the valley overnight, exposed to the elements that had so violently claimed her. It wasn't until dawn, when the fury of the storm had finally abated, that they retrieved her remains. News of her death sent shockwaves through her loved ones. Her sister, Florencia, was paralyzed by grief, her words laced with regret. Regret for unspoken conversations, for unexpressed love, for the moments she wished she could take back. And then there was Gabriela's son, left behind to face a world forever altered by loss. A mother's love, now just an echo. An investigation confirmed the cruel reality. A direct lightning strike, rare but devastating. The second fatal incident of its kind that month in Peru, it served as a grim reminder of the unpredictable dangers lurking in nature's most breathtaking landscapes. Gabriela Basalo's story is one of wonder, risk, and tragedy, a chilling reminder that in the wilderness, nature does not negotiate. It simply takes. On a tragic September day in 2015, the serene beauty of Utah's Zion National Park was shattered when a deadly flash flood swept through Keyhole Canyon, claiming the lives of 7 hikers. These victims, 6 of whom hailed from California, were part of a close-knit hiking group called the Valencia Hiking Crew. Seasoned outdoor enthusiasts, they had no idea their carefully planned adventure would turn into a heartbreaking disaster. The group, composed of men and women in their 50s, had spent months preparing for this expedition. On the morning of their ill-fated trip, 6 members attended a canyoneering class offered by a local outfitter, Zion Adventure Company. Promising to transform novices into capable canyoneers within hours, the class left the group confident and ready. Clad in wetsuits to protect against the canyon's frigid waters and armed with helmets and gear, they eagerly began their descent into the winding sandstone labyrinth. However, Zion's stunning landscape masked a growing danger. The National Weather Service had issued a warning earlier that day, forecasting a 40% chance of rain and a moderate risk of flash flooding, the second highest level of alert. By the time the group obtained their $15 permit to enter Keyhole Canyon, conditions had worsened. The chance of rain had risen to 50%, and rangers posted warnings at the visitor center, emphasizing the probability of floods in the park's slot canyons. Unaware of the looming threat, the hikers pressed on, marveling at the canyon's towering walls and narrow passages. Just hours later, dark clouds began to gather over Zion. At 2:30 p.m., a band of rain swept through the area, followed by a second, more intense storm. The National Weather Service issued an urgent flash flood warning, imploring anyone in the canyons to move to higher ground immediately. Keyhole Canyon, with its narrow corridors and steep descents, offers little room for error when conditions take a turn for the worse. Early sections of the route can sometimes be escaped by scrambling up the rock walls, but once hikers descend deeper, the canyon becomes inescapable. After rappelling into its depths, the only way out is to continue until the exit near Highway 9. As the storm unleashed its fury, the hikers became trapped. Another group of climbers, who had started their descent later and passed the Californians in the canyon, alerted park rangers when the rain began, fearing the slower group might be in danger. Their fears proved tragically accurate. By the time rescue efforts began, the floodwaters had already exacted their toll. The first body, that of Steve Arthur, was found the following day, swept downstream by the powerful currents. Over the next 2 days, search teams discovered the remains of the remaining hikers, scattered at various points along the flood's path. Linda Arthur, Steve's wife, was the last to be found. Her body recovered near the canyon's exit. This calamity was not confined to Keyhole Canyon. In Hilldale, a small community 20 miles south of Zion, the same storm triggered a flash flood that killed 12 members of a Mormon fundamentalist group, including 9 children. It was one of the deadliest weather events in Utah's history, underscoring the unpredictable and unforgiving power of nature. The hikers who perished in Keyhole Canyon were described by their families as experienced, cautious adventurers. They were parents, grandparents, and beloved members of their community, not reckless thrill-seekers. Their tragic end serves as a poignant reminder of the inherent risks of exploring wild spaces, especially in unpredictable conditions. Keyhole Canyon's haunting beauty and narrow passages remain a testament to nature's artistry and raw power. For those who venture into its depths, the lessons of that fateful day in 2015 serve as an enduring warning. Respect the wilderness, heed its warnings, and always prepare for the unexpected. It was a serene Friday evening, March 31st, 2023, at McCormick's Creek State Park in Owen County, Indiana. The park, nestled amidst towering trees and gentle breezes, was the perfect retreat for Brett and Wendy Kincaid from Rossville, Indiana. For 26 years of marriage, they had shared an unwavering love for each other and the outdoors, finding peace in nature's beauty. Brett, a 53-year-old skilled contractor, was known for his reliability and hard work. Wendy, 47, a Purdue University employee, was adored by her colleagues and loved by everyone who knew her. Together, they were pillars of their community, active in their church and deeply devoted to their roles as parents and grandparents. McCormick's Creek, with its tranquil setting, was their ideal getaway, a place to relax, reconnect, and soak in the natural beauty they both cherished. As the evening wore on, Brett and Wendy settled into their camper, savoring the calm that nature had to offer. But nature had other plans. Dark clouds began to gather, signaling the arrival of a powerful storm. The first warning came in the form of gusty winds, stronger and more persistent than usual, followed by sirens blaring through the park. Campers were urged to seek shelter, with many rushing to the cement bathhouse for safety. Brett and Wendy, however, stayed in their camper, perhaps hoping the storm would pass quickly or unaware of how severe it would become. They were wrong. The tornado hit with terrifying force, its winds reaching 138 millimeters per hour. Trees were uprooted, campers were flipped, and the once tranquil park was transformed into a scene of chaos. The storm's devastation was so severe that emergency responders had difficulty navigating through the wreckage. Rescue teams began searching the area immediately, working through the night despite fallen trees, power lines, and scattered debris. Flashlights illuminated the wreckage as they combed through the destruction, searching for survivors. Most campers who had taken refuge in the bathhouse emerged with minor injuries, but Brett and Wendy were nowhere to be found. It wasn't until Saturday morning that the heartbreaking discovery was made. Among the mangled remains of their camper, Brett and Wendy's bodies were found, their lives tragically taken by the storm. News of their passing sent shockwaves through their community. Tributes poured in, reflecting on their generosity, unwavering faith, and kindness. Andrew Bean, a close family friend, described them as humble, inspiring, and profoundly kind, a couple whose love touched everyone they met. The tornado that claimed Brett and Wendy's lives was part of a larger outbreak that devastated multiple states, leaving a death toll of at least 32. In Indiana, 5 lives were lost, including Brett and Wendy's. As McCormick's Creek began the long process of recovery, the Kincaid family leaned on their faith for strength. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to cover funeral expenses, and their church community honored their memory, recalling the countless lives they had touched through Bible classes, mentoring, and acts of kindness. Brett and Wendy Kincaid's story is a sobering reminder of nature's unpredictability. Yet, it is also a testament to lives well lived, full of love, faith, and generosity. Though the storm took them too soon, their legacy will continue to inspire all who knew them. On a frigid November night in 1983, off the coast of Norway, an ordinary shift for a group of deep-sea saturation divers turned into an unimaginable nightmare. The Byford Dolphin, a semi-submersible oil rig operating in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea, became the site of one of the most horrifying decompression accidents in history. What should have been a routine operation ended in devastation, leaving 4 divers and a support crew member dead in a manner so gruesome that even seasoned investigators were left shaken. Saturation diving is an essential but dangerous profession. Working at extreme depths for extended periods requires divers to acclimate to high-pressure environments. To minimize the risk of decompression sickness, also known as the bends, divers live for weeks in pressurized chambers, breathing a carefully controlled mixture of helium and oxygen. This setup allows them to work efficiently without the need for prolonged decompression after each dive. Instead of ascending slowly after each shift, they remain under constant pressure until their assignment is complete, at which point they undergo a carefully monitored, gradual decompression process. On the night of November 5th, a team of divers had just completed their shift and were returning from the depths in a diving bell, a small pressurized chamber designed to transfer them safely between the underwater worksite and the main saturation chambers on the rig. Standard procedure dictated that once the diving bell was attached to the trunk leading to the saturation chambers, the divers inside would secure the hatch, isolating the bell. Only then would the trunk be slowly depressurized before detaching the bell from the system. But something went terribly wrong, whether due to a moment of fatigue, a lapse in communication, or equipment failure. One of the tenders outside the chamber released the clamp, securing the diving bell too soon, before the trunk had been depressurized. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The system, which had been pressurized to 9 atmospheres, roughly 90 meters, 300 feet below sea level, was suddenly exposed to the normal atmospheric pressure of the rig above. The result was an explosive decompression event so violent that it instantly killed the diver who had released the clamp, launching the diving bell away from the rig with tremendous force. Inside the chambers, the 4 divers never had a chance. The rapid decompression caused the gases dissolved in their blood to expand with horrifying speed, leading to massive internal hemorrhaging. In an instant, their tissues ruptured, their blood foamed, and fat cells liquefied. Death came swiftly, but in a manner so gruesome it defied comprehension. One of the divers, closest to the opening where the decompression occurred, suffered a fate even more horrific. The pressure differential sucked his entire body through an opening only 60 centimeters, 24 inches wide. What was left of him was found in multiple locations across the rig, collected in separate bags, his remains scattered by the sheer force of the explosion. A piece of his body was discovered 10 meters, 33 feet away. The autopsy report, later released in chilling detail, painted a grim picture. The top of the victim's skull and brain were missing. His facial skin was completely separated from the bones, and most of his internal organs had been forcibly ejected from his body. His spine and ribs had been shattered beyond recognition. Even his liver, remarkably intact, was found lying on the rig's deck as though it had been surgically removed. The sheer brutality of the accident was enough to shake the diving community to the core. The families of the deceased spent over 2 decades fighting for justice, demanding an investigation into the failures that led to such a horrifying disaster. After 26 years, an official report concluded that serious flaws in the Byford Dolphins' equipment and procedures were to blame, finally bringing some measure of accountability. Though safety protocols were improved in the years following the tragedy, the events of that night remain a haunting proof of the deadly risks faced by deep-sea divers. For those who step into the abyss, the ocean is an unforgiving mistress. One mistake, one oversight, can unleash consequences too horrific to imagine. It was May 21, 2025, in Scottsdale, Arizona. By late afternoon, the temperature had hit 102 degrees. That's when 31-year-old Hannah Moody pulled into the Gateway Trailhead at the McDowell Sonoran Preserve. She'd hiked here countless times before. This place felt familiar, almost safe, but the desert can betray anyone, even those who love it most. Hannah wasn't just another hiker. With more than 44,000 Instagram followers, she shared her faith, her fitness journey, and the peace she found in Arizona's mountains. Her series, Hikes with Han, had become a gentle sanctuary online. Videos filled with gratitude, scripture, and hope. Just days before this hike, she posted about how blessed she felt to be exploring the desert again. Nobody knew that post would become her last. She was supposed to meet friends that evening. She always showed up, she always answered. So when her phone stayed silent, they felt fear long before they admitted it. At 7:50 p.m., police were called. Her car was still parked exactly where she left it. No tracks leading away, no signs of danger, just absence, heavy and worrying. As night fell, officers scoured the desert on foot and bike. Drones buzzed overhead. A helicopter swept the darkening landscape with its spotlight, but the desert swallowed everything: sound, light, hope. By 11:30 p.m., visibility was gone. The search had to pause. At sunrise, more than 20 officers returned, joined by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. The desert didn't care about urgency. It was silent, endless, indifferent. Just after noon, a helicopter spotted something far from the trail, about 600 yards out. A body, exposed, alone. It was Hannah. She had collapsed only 550 meters from the parking lot, close enough to see it if she had been standing upright. Investigators believe she might have stepped off the trail to rest or take what looked like a shortcut. But the heat out here is deceptive. One wrong turn, one extra minute in the open, one moment of dizziness. That's all it takes. The medical examiner's report was devastating. Death by heat exposure, no alcohol, no substances, no medical condition, no struggle, just the brutal, silent force of the desert. Her body showed the early signs of decomposition and minor injuries from falling as she became disoriented. she likely never had the strength to call for help. That might be the hardest part, how close she was, how little the distance mattered. Her mother, Terry, could barely speak through the grief. "We're trying to piece it all together. I hope she didn't suffer. I hope she wasn't aware." Her friend Megan described Hannah as someone who made strangers feel seen. To honor her, Megan organized a sunrise hike on May 31st, what should have been Hannah's 32nd birthday. People showed up with candles, prayers, tears, and stories of how Hannah had touched their lives, many of them from people she'd never even met in person. Before her life became intertwined with hiking and faith, Hannah spent nearly a decade working as a dancer. Leaving that world was a hard, messy transition. She rebuilt herself through bodybuilding and 5 amateur competitions, where she earned national recognition. But it was her faith that anchored her. In her videos, she talked about surrendering, trusting, letting go of the weight she carried. She believed in purpose, she believed in gratitude, and she believed in beauty, even in the most desolate parts of the desert. In one of her final videos, she talked with a bright, relieved smile about her new restaurant job giving her more time for sunset hikes. She called it a blessing. And then, days later, she took her last hike. Months after her passing, her family posted a final message to her Instagram. "She died doing what she adored. Know that you were all precious and loved by her." Thousands responded. Some left prayers. Some wrote how she helped them through dark moments. Others simply said they missed her. It was March 23, 2025, on the lush and remote Makaleha Falls Trail in Kauai, Hawaii, when 26-year-old Gianna Bozetta reached the place she'd dreamed about for years. A pastry chef from Oceanside, California, Gianna was hiking with her boyfriend, Connor Quinton, on what was supposed to be a peaceful, unforgettable adventure. That morning, she told Connor he had made her dream come true. Gianna wasn't your average hiker. She was the executive pastry chef at June Jolie, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Carlsbad, where she'd worked for 4 years. Her team described her as humble, fiercely hard-working, and incredibly gifted. She was known for her sharp wit, deep love for animals, and generous spirit, often volunteering at shelters and always putting others first. That day had started quietly. Gianna and Connor stood in a shallow pool at the base of the falls, taking in the calm beauty of the jungle around them. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crack echoed across the cliffs. Connor glanced up, trying to locate the source. Moments later, a boulder broke loose from high above. Massive, unstoppable. Before they could react, it struck Gianna directly in the head. She collapsed into the water. Connor rushed to pull her out. She was unconscious, but still breathing, bleeding heavily. With no cell signal in the remote area, he made a split-second decision. He ran. For 3 grueling miles, he pushed through rugged terrain, thick brush, and over rocks, desperate to find help. When he finally reached a spot with reception, he called emergency services. Rescue crews moved fast. They reached Gianna, stabilized her, and airlifted her to Wilcox Memorial Hospital before transferring her to Queens Medical Center in Honolulu. Her parents, Katie and Salazetta, immediately flew to Hawaii. They made it just in time to be by her side. Gianna passed away the next day. Her loss was a crushing blow, but her family found comfort knowing that her final hours were spent in a place of pure beauty with the person she loved most. Her mother later shared that Gianna had felt completely happy and at peace before the accident, a moment of true joy. Back in Carlsbad, the news hit hard. At June Jolie, her absence left a hole no one could fill. Restaurant owner John Resnick called the loss paralyzing. Co-workers remembered Gianna as a quiet force of nature, humble, driven, always pushing to improve, always lifting up those around her. Gianna's passion for baking started early. By 12, she was helping her mom with a floral and events business. By 17, she was juggling multiple jobs. After high school, she studied at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa, trained at Michelin-starred restaurants like Spago and Patina, and returned home to build a career filled with creativity and purpose. Alongside her restaurant work, she ran a thriving private cake business known for natural ingredients, vibrant colors, and delicate balance. After her passing, June Jolie hosted a sold-out benefit dinner on April 7th to help her family. A fundraiser organized by family friend Carly W. quickly gained momentum, raising over $40,000 in just a few days toward a $225,000 goal. The support came from across the country. Gianna was remembered as someone who radiated quiet strength, always checking in on friends, always giving more than she took. Her family expressed deep thanks to the first responders and praised Connor's courage for never giving up. Gianna Buzetta wasn't just a chef. She was a dreamer, a giver, a force of light, and in her final moments, she was exactly where she had always wanted to be, living her dream. The Red Valley of Peru is a place of stunning contrasts. Rolling hills painted in deep reds and lush greens, sculpted by mineral-rich soil and thousands of years of geological history. For nature lovers, it's a dream. For adventurers, a challenge. But in November 2024, for Gabriela Diana Basalo, it became the setting of an unimaginable tragedy. Gabriela, originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, was 32 years old. As a teenager, she moved to Santiago, Chile, where she built a full and vibrant life. She had a 10-year-old son and had recently married the love of her life, Samuel Sierra. A creative soul with a practical side, Gabriela had studied cosmetology and aesthetics and worked as a freelance makeup artist. At the same time, she'd been involved in logistics for a dried fruit company since 2020. Friends described her as spirited, artistic, and adventurous. In late October 2024, Gabriela and Samuel set off on a much-anticipated trip to Peru. Their goal, to take in the breathtaking sights, soak up the local culture, and challenge themselves with some real outdoor adventure. On November 1st, they joined a group hike to the Red Valley, a remote, high-altitude area near the famous Rainbow Mountain in the Pitumarca district. The Red Valley sits over 5,200 meters above sea level. It's beautiful, but not easy. The trails are rugged, the air thin, and the weather unpredictable. Still, the group pressed on, hiking through the alien-like terrain of the valley, surrounded by vivid red and green mountains that looked like something from another planet. As the day wore on and the group began their descent, the weather began to shift. What started as a light drizzle quickly turned to a mix of rain and snow. Conditions worsened rapidly. What Gabriela and Samuel didn't know was that a powerful storm was moving in fast. Then came the moment that changed everything. As the group continued down the mountain, a bolt of lightning suddenly struck. It hit Gabriela directly, killing her instantly. The force of the strike left her with severe burns and threw Samuel to the ground, injuring him. Their guide, Ephraim Zamora Galindo, acted quickly to alert authorities, but the worsening weather made rescue efforts nearly impossible. With snow and rain battering the mountainside, responders had no choice but to wait. Gabriela's body remained on the mountain overnight. The following morning, emergency crews reached the site and recovered Gabriela's remains. She was transported to the morgue in the town of Sicuani, near Cusco. Samuel was taken to the hospital for treatment. An investigation was opened, but the cause of death was tragically clear: a direct lightning strike, a rare and deadly hazard in high-altitude regions like the Red Valley. Shockingly, this was the second lightning-related death in Peru that month, underscoring just how dangerous the weather can be in these elevated landscapes. The region's beauty is deceptive. Beneath the painted hills lies a sky capable of turning deadly without warning. Back in Chile, the news of Gabriela's death devastated her family. Her sister, Florencia, expressed deep sorrow, sharing that she wished she had told Gabriela more often how much she loved her. The only comfort was knowing that Gabriela had spent her final days doing something she loved, with someone she loved, in a place she'd always dreamed of visiting. Gabriela's young son now faces a future without his mother, a heart-wrenching reminder of the risks hidden behind nature's most breathtaking scenes. Her story is a sobering example of how quickly beauty can turn to tragedy in the great outdoors. The Carpathian Mountains, rugged, breathtaking, and untamed. For 19-year-old Maria Diana, this remote wilderness was meant to be an escape, a well-earned reward after the grueling months of high school exams. But as she set off on that July day in 2024, she had no idea she was walking straight into a nightmare. Maria had always loved the mountains, the crisp air, the endless greenery, the thrill of adventure. It called to her. That summer, she decided to explore the Yepi May Trail near Brasov with her boyfriend, eager to see the famed Spumoasa waterfall. But not everyone shared her enthusiasm. Her pregnant mother begged her not to go, her warnings heavy with unease. "Be careful," her mother had urged. "These mountains are dangerous." Maria had just smiled. "Nothing bad will happen." She was wrong. At first, the hike was peaceful. The two moved along the winding trail, surrounded by towering trees and the distant murmur of the waterfall. But deep in the wilderness, they were not alone. A shadow moved in the undergrowth. Something was watching them. Then, a snapping branch. A low, guttural growl. The brown bear emerged, massive and relentless. It locked eyes on Maria and her boyfriend, its powerful body tense, its breath heavy. And then, it charged. Panic took over. Maria and her boyfriend scrambled, trying to call for help as the beast closed in. Maria managed to dial emergency services, her voice trembling as she described the horror unfolding before her. "It's coming. Please, please hurry." Her boyfriend called too, but no one could reach them in time. Then, a scream. The bear struck with brutal force, its claws tearing into Maria's leg. She fought, but the beast was too strong, too fast. It dragged her from the path, pulling her toward the trees. Her boyfriend, helpless, could only watch in horror. Maria's screams filled the forest as the bear's powerful jaws clamped down. Then, with a final, violent shake, it threw her over the edge. She plummeted 400 feet down a steep cliff. The silence that followed was deafening. When the Salvamont Prahova rescue team arrived, they found the bear still there, prowling around Maria's lifeless body. It had tasted blood, and it wasn't finished. Rescuers had no choice. A gunshot rang out. The bear collapsed, but the damage was done. Maria lay broken at the base of the cliff, her body covered in claw marks, deep bites, evidence of the brutal attack. There had been no chance of survival. Maria's death sent shockwaves through Romania. Her boyfriend, shaken beyond words, struggled with unbearable guilt. "I should have done more," he told reporters. "It should have been me." Even experienced rescuers were shaken. Dan Banu, the head of the response team, described it as one of the most horrifying attacks he had seen in over a decade. The tragedy sparked a national debate. Romania, home to Europe's largest brown bear population outside Russia, had seen a rise in bear encounters. The government reacted swiftly, approving a controversial measure to cull nearly 500 bears. But was it the right answer? Environmentalists argued that human expansion and irresponsible tourism were pushing bears closer to people. Killing them, they warned, wouldn't solve the deeper problem. Maria Diana's story is more than just a tragedy. It's a warning. The wilderness is beautiful. It is breathtaking. But above all, it is wild. And in the wild, we are never truly in control. On September 19, 2019, Stephen Weber Jr., a 40-year-old from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was living his best life on a dreamy vacation with his girlfriend, Kenesha Antoine. The couple had splurged on a once-in-a-lifetime experience at the ultra-luxurious Manta Resort off the coast of Pemba Island, Tanzania. Their underwater cabin, a jaw-dropping $1,700 a night stay, offered front-row seats to the wonders of marine life, like living inside a giant, fancy fish tank. But this wasn't just any getaway. It was meant to be a milestone in their love story. Stephen, a guy known for his adventurous and romantic streak, had a grand plan up his sleeve. He was about to pop the big question in the most unforgettable way possible, an underwater proposal. With a handwritten note tucked safely in a Ziploc bag and an engagement ring in hand, he set the stage for a moment, straight out of a movie. The note? Pure romance. He joked that he couldn't hold his breath long enough to list all the reasons he loved Kenesha, but assured her that his love for her grew stronger every day. Then, with a flip of the note, he dropped the bombshell. "Will you marry me?" Inside the cozy cabin, Kenesha eagerly waited, capturing the whole thing on video. As Stephen swam up to the glass, grinning like a kid with a secret, he held up the note and then the ring. She laughed, thrilled by the surprise, but just moments after, Stephen swam out of view, never to return. Minutes passed, then more. The excitement turned into worry. He should have been back by now. Kenesha, now panicking, tried to contact the resort staff. No luck. Desperate, she flagged down passing boaters for help. When Stephen was finally brought to the surface, he had a faint pulse, but despite CPR efforts, he didn't make it. Kenesha's heartbreak spilled onto Facebook, where she shared the gut-wrenching reality. Stephen never got to hear her say yes. She reminisced about their magical trip, how he had gushed over their once-in-a-lifetime experience. His sudden passing left everyone in shock. Stephen was an experienced swimmer, familiar with snorkeling, making the tragedy even harder to comprehend. His family, especially his sister Mandy, questioned if there was more to the story. How could such a confident swimmer not make it back? The Manta Resort released a statement confirming that Stephen drowned while freediving outside the cabin. The water was calm, the depth around 32 feet, and yet something went terribly wrong. Despite lingering questions, one truth remains. Stephen spent his final moments doing something he loved for someone he deeply cherished. His family and friends, though devastated, take solace in the joy he brought to so many lives. Kenesha, heartbroken but grateful for their time together, holds on to the memories of the man she was ready to call her husband. His tragic yet touching story continues to remind people of the fragility of life and the power of love. It was August 9th, 1989, in the Stubai Alps of Austria, and Duncan McPherson, a 23-year-old former hockey player from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, was about to embark on a solo adventure. The weather was foggy, the slopes were eerily quiet, and Duncan had one thing on his mind: trying snowboarding for the first time. Now, if there was one thing Duncan was known for, it was his fearless, tough-as-nails attitude. His nickname? McPherson. He played junior hockey for the Saskatoon Blades and was drafted 20th overall by the New York Islanders in the 1984 NHL entry draft. But fate had other plans. Injuries took their toll, and by 23, his hockey career was over. Without a college degree and unsure of his next move, he was at a crossroads. Then, out of the blue, an opportunity arrived. Ron Dixon, a Scottish businessman, invited him to coach and play for the Tayside Tigers, a minor league team. Excited for a fresh start, Duncan decided to take a European road trip before reporting for duty. He planned to visit old friends, see new places, and soak in some adventure. On August 9th, Duncan borrowed a car from his former teammate George Pitt and drove to the Stubai Alps. He checked into a hostel, eager to hit the slopes the next day. At the resort, he chatted with a worker named Walter, explaining his plans. Despite the poor weather and near-zero visibility, Duncan was determined to snowboard. That was the last time anyone saw him. When he failed to show up for his scheduled coaching meeting in Dundee on August 12th, his family and friends panicked. Austrian authorities, however, weren't too concerned. Maybe he changed his plans? Maybe he ran off? But his family knew something was wrong. 6 weeks later, his red Opel hatchback was found in the resort parking lot, untouched, with his passport and belongings still inside. No one had seen or heard from him, and the trail went cold. For years, his parents, Bob and Linda, searched relentlessly, making 9 trips to Austria, hiring private investigators and pleading for media coverage. But Duncan had vanished without a trace. Fast forward 14 years to 2003. A worker at the Stubai Glacier Resort noticed a glove sticking out of the ice on the Schaufelferner Glacier. When he pulled on it, a frozen body surfaced, completely encased in ice. It was Duncan McPherson. The glacier had preserved his remains, and his clothing and wallet confirmed his identity. But this wasn't a simple case of a snowboarder getting lost. His broken snowboard was still strapped to his back, and his body showed brutal injuries: a shattered femur, severed limbs, multiple broken bones. These weren't injuries typical of a fall. The initial theory? Duncan fell into a crevasse and succumbed to his injuries. But Canadian pathologists had another idea. A snowcat, a massive machine used to groom ski slopes, might have accidentally run him over in the fog. The damage to his body and snowboard seemed to match that scenario. But if that was the case, why was his body buried for 14 years? Had someone tried to hide what happened? As investigators dug deeper, things didn't add up. The resort had claimed they returned his snowboard years earlier, yet there it was, still attached to his back. His car sat in the parking lot for weeks, yet authorities never properly investigated it. Was this just incompetence, or was there a cover-up to protect the resort's reputation? Even glacier movement theories didn't fully explain his severe injuries. More than 30 years later, the truth remains elusive. Was it a tragic accident, or did someone cover up what really happened? Duncan's family still searches for answers, but many questions remain unanswered. Officially, it's labeled an accident, but the mystery of Duncan McPherson's disappearance lingers, a haunting reminder of how easily the truth can be buried beneath the ice. The early morning of July 6, 2021, shattered the tranquility of Ovando, Montana. Nestled along the Blackfoot River, this quiet town became the backdrop for a chilling encounter, one that would end in tragedy. Leah Davis Loken, a 65-year-old retired nurse from Chico, California, had always embraced adventure. She was an avid cyclist, drawn to the thrill of the outdoors, and had eagerly set off on a long-distance journey along the Great Divide mountain bike route. She had prepared for months, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. Ovando, a town of fewer than 100 residents, is known for its rugged wilderness and proximity to the vast Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, a landscape shared with an estimated 1,000 grizzly bears. Leah's journey brought her here, and rather than seeking the safety of a hotel like her sister and friend, she made the fateful decision to camp outside, behind a small museum. As darkness fell, Leah and a Texas couple set up camp, but in the dead of night their peaceful rest was shattered by the presence of an intruder, a massive 417-pound grizzly bear. At around 3 a.m., Leah awoke to the sound of the beast breathing just inches from her fragile tent. A low, guttural huff sent chills down her spine. The campers sprang into action, making loud noises to scare the bear off. It retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the wilderness. Shaken but relieved, Leah took precautions. She removed snacks and dry food from her tent and placed them inside a building. She armed herself with bear spray, but one crucial mistake remained. Inside her tent, 2 toiletry bags, once used to store dried blueberries, still carried the faintest trace of their former contents. Just 10 feet away, her bicycle sat with saddlebags still containing food. Convinced she had done enough, Leah lay back down and drifted off to sleep under the vast Montana sky. Less than an hour later, terror returned. At approximately 4 a.m., the grizzly was back, this time with deadly intent. It ripped through Leah's tent with horrifying force. In the blink of an eye, it lunged, pinning her beneath its weight. A Texas camper awoke to the nightmare unfolding before his eyes. He saw the bear rearing up, pouncing viciously on Leah's tent. He shouted, grabbing his bear spray, and discharged it in a desperate attempt to stop the attack. But it was too late. The bear had already inflicted fatal wounds. Leah never had a chance. An autopsy later revealed the brutal reality. Her neck had been broken, her spine severed. She had died instantly. This was not a defensive attack. This was predation. Wildlife experts would later confirm that the grizzly had become food conditioned, learning to associate humans with an easy meal. It had stalked Leah, returning with lethal precision to finish what it had started. 3 days later, the predator struck again, raiding a chicken coop near Ovando. This time, it wouldn't escape. Wildlife officials tracked the bear down and shot it dead. DNA testing confirmed what many had feared. It was the same bear that had taken Leah's life. Leah's tragic end was a stark reminder of the ever-growing conflict between humans and grizzlies in the northern Rockies. Leah Davis Loken had spent her life chasing adventure, but on that fateful July morning, she became part of a terrifying reality, one where the line between human and predator grows thinner by the day. Angel's Landing in Utah's Zion National Park is renowned for its breathtaking views, but it also holds a reputation as one of the most perilous hiking trails in the United States. The route challenges hikers with narrow pathways, sheer drop-offs, and steep inclines, demanding caution and physical readiness. Chains, bolted into the rock, provide support along the most treacherous sections, but even these safeguards cannot eliminate the risks entirely. Despite its dangers, Angel's Landing remains a popular destination for thrill seekers and nature enthusiasts alike. However, the trail's hazards have led to multiple fatalities over the years, serving as stark reminders of the need for preparation and respect for the wilderness. One such tragedy occurred in 2017, when 45-year-old Tate Bolino lost his footing on the steep, narrow trail and fell 1,000 feet to his death. This devastating accident underscored the critical importance of understanding personal limits, adhering to safety recommendations, and approaching challenging hikes with respect for the inherent risks. Officials have repeatedly urged visitors to exercise caution and to avoid the trail altogether if they lack sufficient experience or physical fitness. Angel's Landing has also been the site of medical emergencies unrelated to falls, further emphasizing the trail's grueling nature. In one such incident, a 63-year-old man from San Diego collapsed near Scout Lookout, a point almost 2 miles up the steep West Rim Trail and just before the chain-assisted section leading to Angel's Landing. When park rangers arrived, they found fellow hikers with medical training performing CPR on the man. Despite their efforts and nearly 90 minutes of CPR administered by both the hikers and emergency responders, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Rangers utilized an automated external defibrillator and a heart monitor during their attempts to revive him, but the life-saving measures proved unsuccessful. Preliminary findings suggested a heart attack as the cause of death, though an investigation was still pending. The incident mobilized over 20 search and rescue team members, including paramedics, emergency medical technicians, and a park ambulance. The swift response highlighted the challenges of addressing medical emergencies in remote and difficult-to-access areas, particularly on strenuous trails like Angel's Landing. These tragedies highlight the critical importance of preparation, self-awareness, and respect for one's physical limits when venturing into challenging outdoor environments. Zion National Park officials continuously remind visitors that hikes like Angel's Landing are not suitable for everyone. The combination of physical exertion, exposure to high altitudes, and the mental focus required to navigate narrow ledges makes this trail one of the most demanding in the park. Angel's Landing attracts adventurers seeking an adrenaline rush, but it also calls for an elevated level of responsibility. Knowing when to turn back, recognizing signs of physical distress, and adhering to park guidelines are crucial steps in ensuring safety on this iconic but unforgiving trail. While the allure of Angel's Landing lies in its extraordinary beauty, it is a place that demands preparation, vigilance, and utmost respect for nature's power. It was July 11, 2023, a sunny morning in Yosemite National Park, California. Grace Roloff, a 20-year-old college student, was buzzing with excitement. She and her father, Jonathan, had secured coveted permits to climb Half Dome, one of Yosemite's most iconic and perilous hikes. This was going to be an adventure for the books, a father-daughter bonding experience on a trail that demanded both grit and determination. Grace, a student at Arizona State University, wasn't new to challenging hikes. She'd already conquered Angel's Landing in Zion National Park and trekked through the Grand Canyon. Prepared as ever, she'd even splurged on a shiny new pair of hiking boots, ensuring she was geared up for the grueling 14-16-mile trek. Little did she know, those boots would become infamous in her story. The day began perfectly. Blue skies, sunshine, and breathtaking views. As they ascended the famous cables leading to the summit, Grace and her dad were in awe. Reaching the top, they soaked in the panoramic beauty of Yosemite, sharing a heartfelt moment of accomplishment. Life felt like one big adventure, but in the wilderness, the skies can change their mind faster than a college student deciding on a major. As they began their descent, an ominous black cloud rolled in, and rain poured down like a bucket of bad decisions. The granite cables, once their trusty guides, transformed into slick slides of doom. Dad, my shoes are slippery," Grace said, realizing her brand new boots weren't living up to the promise on the box. As the rain worsened, the trail became a slow-moving traffic jam of hikers, all trying to navigate the now treacherous descent. Grace, ever determined, pressed on, but about 3/4 of the way down, tragedy struck. Her boots betrayed her, and she slipped between two wooden planks. Her father lunged to grab her, but it was too late. Grace fell nearly 200 feet down the granite face. Jonathan could only watch in horror, his heart sinking faster than the rain pouring from the sky. Desperate, he scrambled down the cables to find her, but was forced to stop, the terrain too steep and dangerous. Rain and hail battered the mountain as Jonathan called for emergency help. For 3 agonizing hours, rescue teams braved the storm, but when they finally reached Grace, the news was devastating. She had suffered a fatal head injury and likely passed instantly. Grace's tragic fall left a hole in the hearts of her family and friends. She was known for her fearless spirit, kindness, and determination. She was on track to graduate early, aiming to become a high school math teacher, balancing her studies with multiple jobs, and still making time for her passion for hiking. For Jonathan, this climb, meant to be a bonding adventure, became a memory too painful to revisit. He vowed never to hike Half Dome again, calling it unnecessarily dangerous. Inspired by Grace's life and legacy, he's now advocating for safety improvements to the trail, from adding more planks to requiring harnesses, hoping to prevent others from enduring the heartbreak his family suffered. In her memory, a fundraiser was set up to support causes close to Grace's heart. For those who knew her, she was a bright light, a fearless adventurer, and someone who left an indelible mark on everyone she met. Jonathan is determined that her story will inspire change, ensuring no one else faces the same devastating fate on Half Dome's slick granite face. On a warm summer night in 1974, Disneyland, the so-called happiest place on Earth, became the site of an unthinkable tragedy. An 18-year-old employee named Deborah Gale Stone was killed in a horrifying accident at the America Sings attraction, a newly opened musical show celebrating American history. What should have been just another night of joyful performances ended in disaster, forever altering the way amusement park safety was handled. The evening of July 8th had begun like any other for Deborah. A recent high school graduate from Santa Ana, California, she had taken a summer job at Disneyland, thrilled to be working in a place filled with magic and wonder. Her role as a hostess for America Sings was simple but essential, greeting guests as they settled into the rotating theater. America Sings had only been open for a little over a week, having debuted on June 29th as a replacement for the Carousel of Progress. The attraction featured an outer ring of 6 seating areas that rotated around a stationary core, moving audiences from scene to scene as animatronic figures performed patriotic songs. The concept was innovative, but hidden within its moving parts was a lethal design flaw. That night, Deborah took her position beside the stage, microphone in hand, welcoming guests as the theater rotated into place. Then, something went terribly wrong. At approximately 11 p.m., as the audience from one cycle exited and the theater reset for the next group, Deborah somehow found herself caught in the narrow space between the rotating wall and the stationary stage. A chilling scream cut through the music and chatter of the park. In the adjacent theater, a man named Daniel Robeson, a 33-year-old Air Force serviceman visiting with his family, witnessed a horrifying sight. From his seat in the front row, he caught a glimpse of what he initially thought was a child being pulled into the gap between the walls. In a moment of confusion and terror, he realized the truth. It was Deborah. The rotation of the theater stopped, but it was too late. Deborah had been crushed between the walls, trapped in a deadly space no one had foreseen as a potential hazard. The accident sent shockwaves through Disneyland. The Los Angeles Times reported on July 10th that Deborah died at 11 p.m. during a 45-second interval when the audience had left her theater and it was moving into position to start a new cycle. It was the first employee fatality in Disneyland's 19-year history. Though there had been previous guest deaths at the park, this was the first time an attraction had taken the life of a cast member. America Sings was shut down immediately following the tragedy, remaining closed for 2 days while engineers worked frantically to improve its safety features. A warning light was installed to alert operators if anyone stepped too close to the dangerous gap. Later, additional barriers were put in place to prevent another catastrophe. For many, the accident exposed a sobering truth. Even in a place built for joy and wonder, hidden dangers could lurk behind the scenes. Deborah's death served as a reminder that innovation and spectacle must always be balanced with caution and safety. Though America Sings continued to operate until 1988 before being replaced by Star Tours, the memory of that fateful night never truly faded. For those who remember, Deborah Gale Stone's story remains a haunting chapter in Disneyland's history. A young woman full of promise, lost to a tragedy that could have been prevented. It was June 9, 2025, deep inside the remote Phraktos forest of northeastern Greece, a place so wild and untouched that even seasoned hikers rarely set foot there. Into this wilderness ventured 61-year-old Christos Stavrianidis and his close friend Demetrius Kouglou. They weren't out for a casual hike. They were on a mission tied to a forgotten chapter of history. A year earlier, Christos had stumbled upon something extraordinary. The wreck of a World War II Greek warplane, hidden for more than 70 years and still remarkably intact. It haunted him, this rusting relic of the past lying alone in the forest. He wanted others to be able to find it safely, to preserve it before nature swallowed it completely. And so he returned, determined to map out a route. Christos wasn't some inexperienced adventurer. He and Demetrius knew the mountains well. They carried pepper spray, gear, and even brought along a dog for protection. Everything about the trip said they were ready for anything, but the wilderness had its own plans. As they pushed deeper into the rugged Rhodope Mountains, Christos began filming with his phone. The early footage was calm, trees swaying, birds calling, sunlight slipping between branches. But then, something emerged from the quiet. Christos spotted movement, a large brown bear. He called out to Demetrius to get the pepper spray ready. Moments later, the bear stepped into the frame. The dog reacted first, charging, barking, snapping. The forest erupted into chaos. Demetrius managed to spray the bear, and for a moment, it seemed to work. The animal retreated, shaking its head. But instead of disappearing into the trees, it redirected its focus and locked onto Christos, who was standing dangerously close to a cliff edge he hadn't noticed. Christos had already used up his own spray. Demetrius later said the bear didn't look like a killer. It looked frightened, confused, reacting out of instinct. But fear doesn't make an animal less dangerous. In a sudden burst of movement, the bear lunged forward, not to maul Christos, but to push back, to defend itself. That one swift motion was enough. Christos lost his footing. There was no time to grab onto anything. One slip, and he plunged into the ravine below, a drop of more than 2,600 feet. Demetrius scrambled up a tree for safety, calling for help with shaking hands. When rescuers finally arrived, the forest told the story clearly. Broken branches, scattered gear, enormous paw prints, and Christos's phone, still recording until the moment the world dropped out beneath him. At the bottom of the ravine, they found his body. The fall had killed him instantly. The forensic report confirmed it. No bite marks, no claw wounds. Only catastrophic fall injuries. Shattered ribs, fractured spine, massive internal bleeding. It was not a predatory attack. It was one split second of panic, one defensive shove from a startled animal, and one step too close to the edge. Wildlife experts later explained that Greek brown bears are rarely aggressive. This one likely saw the men and the dog as a threat, and in the confusion, the dog's second rush might have triggered the bear's return, turning a retreat into a fatal encounter. Authorities reviewed the recovered video. It captured Christos's calm filming, then sudden tension, his voice calling to Demetrius, the dog barking wildly, the sound of pepper spray, the bear's low growl, then silence, the cut-off clip that marked the moment he fell. Christos's funeral was held days later in his hometown of Drama, Greece. His wife, his 3 children, and countless friends struggled to grasp how a man who had spent his life navigating mountains could be lost so suddenly. He had simply wanted to guide others to a hidden piece of history. Instead, he became part of one. Today, Greece has only around 450 to 500 brown bears left. They avoid humans. They disappear before they attack. It was September 1st, 1974, when the Cowden family set off for what was supposed to be a quiet, last-minute camping trip in Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. Richard Cowden, a 28-year-old logging truck driver, had planned to spend the weekend working on his driveway. But when his truck broke down, he and his wife Belinda, just 22, packed up their 2 kids, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa, along with their basset hound, Droopy, and headed for the woods instead. The Cowdens were a regular outdoorsy family from White City, Oregon, and their chosen spot, Carberry Creek in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, seemed peaceful. That morning, Richard and little David were seen buying milk at a general store in the now-gone town of Copper around 9 a.m. It was the last time anyone would see the family alive. When the Cowdens didn't show up for dinner that night at Belinda's mother's house, she drove to the campsite, and instantly she knew something was wrong. The truck was parked as if nothing was amiss. Keys lay on the picnic table. Belinda's purse and the baby's diaper bag were left out. The camp stove was fully set up, and the milk, cold and unopened, was still sitting there. Even Richard's wallet and Belinda's cigarettes were untouched. The only thing missing? Their swimsuits. After waiting an hour, she called the police. Authorities arrived that night, and right away the scene felt off. One trooper later said the whole place felt spooky. The next morning, Droopy, the family dog, was found alone, scratching at the general store's door, dirty but alive. It only deepened the mystery. A massive search followed. Hundreds of volunteers, police, forest rangers, and even the National Guard scoured the rugged terrain. Helicopters with infrared sensors scanned from above. Over 25 miles were searched, but there was no trace of the family. Robbery was ruled out, so was drowning or a voluntary disappearance. Everything valuable was left behind, and Richard made enough to support them. Something terrible had happened, but no one could figure out what. Then, 7 months later, on April 12, 1975, 2 gold prospectors stumbled upon a shallow cave about 7 miles from the campsite. Inside, behind a barrier of carefully placed rocks, were the remains of Belinda, David, and baby Melissa. Just outside the cave, tied to a nearby tree, was Richard. Dental records confirmed the worst. The autopsies were horrifying. Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle. Melissa had been beaten to death. Richard's cause of death couldn't be determined, but it was clear the family had been murdered. Oddly, a search volunteer swore the cave had been empty during earlier searches, suggesting the killer may have moved the bodies. A witness from Los Angeles recalled seeing a suspicious group, a man, a woman, and another man in a pickup near the Cowdens' camp. Investigators believed it could have been Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted murderer recently paroled, who was known to be in the area. His girlfriend later confirmed he owned a .22 rifle, and a former cellmate claimed he had confessed. Still, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Little is now serving 3 life sentences for another violent attack. But he's never spoken a word about the Cowden case, and to this day, the disappearance and murder of this innocent family remains one of Oregon's darkest, most chilling mysteries. The forest has long buried the truth, and their killer still walks free.